4 days ago, his father passed away. His mother died of an illness when he was still a child. And the relatives he has left, he doesn't even call them. He didn't have a girlfriend, nor did he have any close friends. In fact, there was nothing to keep him in this world, not even a word. But then he got to thinking. He could not even think that everything in this life could turn out like this. 10 minutes ago, however, a medium-sized guy came out of a building. He was dressed in a black suit, his dark hair blowing in the wind. He sighed with a kind of sadness and said to himself with relief that the event had finally passed. But in his mind he thought about how hard it was to grieve alone. The boy thought about how hard it must have been for his father at his mother's funeral. He was walking along the road, through a small crowd of people. A large number of cars passed by, honking repeatedly. It was already night, and there were still a lot of people. The guy was in his thoughts, thinking about how he was alone after all, leading a lonely life, a 27-year-old bachelor from Hachiyoji. He had no relatives, friends, or a girl he loved. For the last few days, the guy had been so busy that he started moving through life without thinking. Kirito's name flew through his mind. The boy habitually returned to his parents' house, thinking that his father would meet him there. His father's silhouette appeared in front of his eyes, who happily addressed him by the name Kirito, and explained that he had returned home again. The boy leaned on the railing of the bridge and lowered his head down, thinking that he would never be greeted by his father again. He also thought about the fact that his paid vacation was ending today, but remembered that he had asked for half a day off. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. He received a message from his manager, who wrote to him that his time off from work had caused him to be completely overwhelmed and asked him not to go to the funeral anymore. However, he also wrote that he should go to work tomorrow, that he would not give him any more time off this year, or else he would cut his salary. After reading the entire message, he laughed hysterically and talked about how his manager was making fun of him, apparently not caring about the situation that Kirito had lost the last member of his family. He said to himself how sick he was of this life and everything that was going on. He began to think that he didn't belong in this world. In his head he began to think about leaving everything here and going to another place where he could live comfortably. Then a voice came from behind him saying that some entity could help him. With shock, he shouted with fright whose voice it was. In a moment a strange seal with a bright light appeared under his feet, and he was even more shocked. In an instant he appeared in a completely different world. There was a medieval setting, old houses, and a castle in the distance. He couldn't even find words to describe what was happening. He turned around and saw the strange creatures and wondered aloud what they were and where he had gone. A voice appeared again and explained that this was another world, the place he wanted to go. Kirito, shocked, repeated about the other world. The voice repeated that he had given him the power to move to a distant place, that he could live here as he wished. Crying out that this explanation was not enough, he shouted out what it all meant. However, due to his shouting, a large number of people gathered around him and began to whisper. He realized that such a thing was impossible. He remembered saying that he really wanted to go somewhere else, but the other world was a shock to him. However, he was glad that he didn't have to work for that black company anymore and realized that he should move somewhere instead of standing in the center of attention of the crowd. One idea occurred to him that if he moved on, he would be able to come to his senses faster. Fear would not leave him as long as he stood still, but for the moment he was completely confused. Kirito didn't understand how to get back home and that there was nothing he could do about it, but honestly he didn't have that much desire to go back. Walking forward down the street, he looked around in all directions, trying not to attract the attention of others. He decided to think of something he could live in, but as he looked around he realized that this world was like a game, because there were all kinds of creatures around him, from elves to strange lizards. He began to realize that he had previously played something similar in the fantasy genre. In any case, whatever this world was, he needed money, but the question was how and where to earn it. As he continued to walk on, he noticed how everyone was looking at him and realized that it was because of his clothes. They stood out very much in contrast to the medieval world. There was no such color and shape in this world. The solution came quickly to his mind. It was to sell his clothes and buy new ones that fit this world. Luck was on his side. He was just approaching a clothing store. When he entered the store, a man of short stature, with gray hair on his head, ran up to him in a flash. He smiled and said hello to the man, calling him nobleman, and asked him what clothes he would like to buy today. Kirito was very surprised that he was mistaken for a nobleman. He said he wanted to sell the clothes he was wearing. The salesman examined them more closely and said that the fabric was quite good, not to mention the workmanship. He still asked the guy if he was sure he wanted to sell them. he decided to keep silent, thinking that he would be less likely to get screwed over. Kirito agreed and said that he wanted to sell it, asking how much it would cost. The man replied that the cloth was very good and had no damage, and said 40 gold coins. Kirito wondered a bit about the price tag. Kirito thought about the fact that he didn't know the monetary system of this world at all. The man noticed his thoughtful look and offered a price of 45 gold coins, but the guy said he didn't know and would think about it for a while. The salesman agreed to 50 gold pieces. He assured him that any other store would not offer a higher price. The boy thought again. Kirito really hoped that was the case. He agreed to the price and thanked the salesman. He also asked for help in picking out the usual clothes he would wear in this town, which the man happily agreed to. When he went outside in his new appearance, he happily noted that he had purchased minimal equipment, spent 5 silver coins and 5 copper coins. However, he thought about it and realized that he could speak the new language without any problems, and he could read very well. He remembered the words of that voice again, the work of that creature again, the voice saying that Kirito shouldn't worry at all. Just in case, he decided to check it out later. But then his thoughts were interrupted by someone calling out to him. A little girl came up to him and tugged at his cape, asking him if he wanted to buy flowers. He asked in surprise, but he had a great idea, and also it's a very good opportunity. He agreed and said he would buy flowers from her, to which she was surprised and smiled. However, his idea was that he wanted to ask her for something, to which she smiled and agreed. But first he had to buy flowers from her and then she would answer any question. In his mind he thought about how stubborn a child she was. The boy asked how much the flowers cost, to which he got an answer of 2 silver coins. He held out the 2 coins in his small hands, to which the girl thanked him. Kirito smiled back at her and asked if she would answer his question, to which he received a positive answer. In his mind he realized that the question was strange but cheap. In his mind the boy realized he couldn't ask an adult about it. He showed her a coin and asked her what the value of the money was. She asked him in surprise what, and that was his question, to which he replied that her story would help him a lot, and in his mind it was a matter of life and death for him. The girl agreed and explained the value of each coin. He understood how everything was organized in this world by the monetary system, even managed to translate them into Japanese yen. By Japanese standards, he had 494,480 yen. Thinking that he was not very rich, but it would be enough to start a new life, the girl turned to him again with a smile and asked him if there was anything else he wanted to ask her. He decided to ask what the name of the city it was in was. She answered that they were in Zeril, the capital of the kingdom of Ardius. He realized that he didn't know such names, which was to be expected. He asked her if she had heard of the country of Japan. She asked again, confusing the letters in the word, and said she had never heard of it. In his mind he realized that it was indeed a different world. However, he asked her one last question about where to get a job here. A smile fell on the girl's face and she asked with seriousness that he was not already unemployed. In his mind he thought about the fact that at 27 he was already being called uncle. He explained that he was a traveler and had come to this city recently. The girl thought about it and said that if he needed a job, he could go to the Adventurers Guild. Kirito asked about the guild and she explained that the guild gave him tasks and then paid him money for completing them. The girl said that a man could earn money by killing different monsters, and she waved her invisible sword, saying that her father had told her about it. Kirito remarked that she probably took after her father, to which she agreed. Thoughts flashed through his mind that he couldn't afford to be unemployed in this world. Kirito asked her to show him where that particular guild was, to which she agreed with a smile. After walking a few faces through the small town, they came to a house that stood on a wooden foundation, with a sign with the outline of crossed swords hanging near the door. When he entered the building, he saw tall men who were dressed in armor. In his mind he called them tough guys, and realized that he should behave naturally, also thinking about the fact that he felt as if he was passing by gopniks who were sitting near the store. Then he was approached with the phrase "welcome." A girl with the ears of an animal stood in front of him and said that the Adventurers Guild was at his service. She was dressed in some kind of uniform with guild symbols. The boy began to look at her, wondering if her ears were real, but she immediately asked him what his business was. He averted his gaze and said he wanted to become an adventurer, trying not to look at her appearance, as it was not polite to stare at her for long. The girl agreed with a smile and asked him to register for the guild. He also asked if he needed help in learning how the guild works, which Kirito said with a smile that it would be a good idea. The girl began to explain to him that all adventurers have ranks from S to F. The rank can be increased depending on the rate of completed quests. The higher the rank, the higher the reward and more difficult the quests. In their country there are only a few adventurers who have rank S. They are very influential people. They often take quests directly from the royal family, so many aspire to get the highest rank. At the moment of registration in the guild, each adventurer receives an initial rank F at the initial level. You can take on quests related to finding missing items, deliveries, or cleaning the city. When the rank increases, you will be able to conquer monsters, collect valuable materials, escort, and so on. In this way you will be able to get more and more complex tasks. However, if you worked in a group and was approved by the guild leadership, he could take a higher rank assignment. The girl encouraged him and told him to strive for a higher rank. She also explained that such things as violence, stealing, and killing were forbidden in the guild. After hearing all this, Kirito thought about the minimum of information. The girl smilingly explained that everything he needed to know she had told him, and if he didn't change his mind about joining, the registration procedure required an entrance fee of 5 silver. He began to realize that questions would arise as he went along, but he agreed. Taking out an unusual crystal, the girl asked him to hold his hand over it. The boy asked what it was. She said that it was a crystal required to register information for adventurers. She explained that all guilds had such orbs and they could use them to exchange data. Kirito confirmed that it was very convenient, but he wondered how they worked. Here the girl lowered her gaze and explained with an apology that she couldn't talk about it, to which the guy himself apologized for asking such stupid questions. She asked him to hold out his hand over the ball so that he could gather all the information he needed, and Kirito obediently held out his hand. Various inscriptions with different information about him began to appear around the guy. The girl said that all the information had appeared. The girl began to read, but after reading only the name Fruity Kirito, she asked with a bit of surprise what it was. Fruity Kirito, human, rank F, skill, space magic. The girl read about the skill and was surprised. The girl decided to contact the senior of the guild. Addressing her as Ms. Lumina, she said that she has a newcomer with the skill of space magic, and clarified whether she knows anything about it. To which the elder asked in surprise, "Isn't there water, fire, air, earth, light, or darkness magic?" She confidently said that it was, and that it was the first time she had encountered such magic. The girl with the appearance of a beast apologized and asked if they should inform the head of the guild, to which the older girl said that he was on a business trip. Kirito asked if he could continue registering, and the girl asked the head of the guild what to do next, but the head of the guild said that he was on a business trip. Kirito continued her answer that he did not do anything wrong. In the rules of the guild there is no such rule that you cannot register an adventurer with non-standard magical abilities adventurer. To which the girl with the appearance of a beast confirmed all of this and continued to register. The girl held out a token confirming that the boy had become an adventurer with rank F. She explained that he would be exempted from duty when completing quests. She also explained that if he lost the token he could be fined 3 silver coins. Kirito nodded understandingly. The boy turned around and was about to leave after the words registration was successful, but the girl decided to ask him if he wanted to take the first task, to which he said that he would come for it when he was fully ready. Kirito walked down the street and decided to practice magic. He went to the nearest corner and saw the barrels there. With a deft movement of his hand and the phrase cut, one of the barrels instantly split into 2 parts. He also put his hand forward and said the word distortion, and in an instant a black space appeared in the barrel. Kirito commented on the skill acting on the space itself, saying how amazing it was, saying also that such magic was on the verge of being foul. Earlier when he had touched the crystal, he had gained knowledge of space magic. There really wasn't any magic that affected space. In fact, it shouldn't be there at all, because such magic could destroy anything. Whoever uses it could be dangerous, but that's not certain. He realized that he had this power because of the creature that had brought him here. What was it thinking when it gave him such dangerous magic and threw him into such a world? However, he was not given a specific mission like in computer games. He remembered the words about the power to go to different places. He wondered what that meant. He wondered if it was possible to travel through space with this magic. Standing in front of the house, he decided to visualize the roof. In an instant he appeared on the roof, to which he was very surprised, having scrolled in his mind about instant teleportation. He decided to go to a place where the view from the height is much more beautiful. In the same instant he disappeared from the roof where he was. With a sudden movement he appeared on the balcony of the tallest building. He breathed a sigh of relief, saying that it was scary, but it was worth it. Looking forward he saw what a beautiful view spread out in front of him. Remembering his father, he immediately appeared before his eyes. He remembered his father telling him not to think only about work, because his life belonged to him, explaining that he should live the life he wanted. Kirito sighed sadly, covering his eyes a little. He began to realize that there wouldn't be any skyscrapers, cars and trains, as well as the company he hated, and superficial awkward relationships. He remembered the voice telling him that he could go anywhere and live as he wished, and that was the best thing to do. Looking into the distance, he decided to live as he wished. Enjoying the evening view, he continued to stare into the distance. Some of the houses already had lights on. Most of the people had already gone home, and only in some of the taverns were the echoes of different songs. Saying about his father and that mysterious voice, he said that they were right. He decided to use this magic to live this life happily. In any case, he could go anywhere with this magic. His abilities had become very high. Saying to himself the phrase that this is the most excellent way to find his place. Waking up early in the morning, he decided it would be his first day of work. Arriving at the guild, he took his first quest despite it being a normal delivery. He thought about taking a few quests and taking quantity. However, surprised by the 5 quests at once, the girl who was registering him said that it was impossible, and if not done in time they could be fined. He was sure he could handle that many, to which the girl said she could not approve and asked him to reduce it to 2 quests. She didn't know what his magic was capable of, but there was nothing he could do about it. With rank F, he could only take small jobs. In this world, everyone gets around with horses, but courier work counted pretty well with spatial magic. But unfortunately, he wasn't interested in taking jobs related to destroying monsters. He realized that no matter how strong the spatial magic was, not long ago he was just an office plankton. Looking at the delivery information sheet, he looked at the address of the client's house. It was in the southern district, and the delivery should be in the eastern district. After leaving the guild, Kirito looked around and remembered the balcony on the high tower. Then he teleported there, explaining that the view was very good. However, teleportation had a single disadvantage. Unfortunately, teleportation could only teleport to places he had been to or seen before. So he decided to climb higher to look around so that he could teleport to a certain place. But once he was in a new place, he would be able to move there all the time. He just had to imagine it. He looked around the area from high up and saw the house he wanted. He imagined it in his head, and with a sharp swing he moved to it. Knocking on the door, he said hello and said he was an adventurer. An elderly man came out, short in stature and with gray hair on his head. In his head he wondered if it was Mr. Braum. With a smile, Kirito explained that he was here about a delivery request. The man smiled and said he was surprised at how fast they worked. Mr. Braum pointed to a couple of chairs and asked him to take them to his granddaughter, to which Kirito nodded with a smile, to which the old man wished him a good trip. Mr. Brown walked over to the chairs and reached out his hand to his right and cast the spatial vault spell. In an instant a black circle appears near him, in which he threw a couple of chairs. He was surprised at how much this magic is very convenient. Calling himself a cheater in his head, he compared the magic to the inventory in a computer game. But he decided to think about it later. Appearing outside Mr. Braum's granddaughter's house, he knocked with the words that a delivery had arrived. From behind the door came a woman's voice saying that she would be right there. Opening the door, a small girl with a cute face stood in front of him. Lowering his eyes into the note, he said that he had brought 2 chairs at Mr. Braum's request, to which the girl smiled and was glad that they were the chairs from her grandfather. She explained that the chairs were very heavy and she didn't think they would be brought so soon. However, she appealed to the guy that an adventurer like him didn't seem as strong as he appeared to be, to which Kirito only laughed awkwardly. However, she said that she was very happy that they had been delivered so quickly. Kirito remembered his past work routine of taking everything for granted, and he remembered how his boss was always pushing him. It felt good to be thanked for his work, but it was time for him to go, so he said goodbye to the girl and left. A few days later, and a large number of completed quests, he again came to the guild where there was noise, various chatter and laughter. The girl at the front desk called the guy over. He obediently approached her, but the guy forgot her name, to which the girl shrieked in bewilderment at how he could forget her name. Reminding her name Kushi, she said that she was in charge of Mr. Kirito's work and asked him not to forget it. It flashed through the guy's mind that she was acting like a guild elder. Kushi couldn't believe that he had completed all the tasks so quickly and had to show him how his space magic worked. This kind of magic had never existed in this world before, but he weighed the pros and cons and decided it was best. The girl couldn't believe that he had done all the tasks in 15 minutes and said it was impossible. Kirito finally showed her how his magic worked, and the shocked girl thought about it. He thought about how strict they were, but decided to ask her why she had called him. After explaining what the matter was, she suggested he go outside the royal capital. Shocked, Kirito questioned her about it and asked why he was being offered such a thing. She explained that he was working very hard and had completed almost all the tasks, but in her mind she thought that soon adventurers of the initial rank would have nothing to eat for, to which the guy apologized with an awkward smile. However, if he worked outside the capital, he would be able to fulfill any number of requests he wanted. Working outside really interested him. He remembered that outside the kingdom there were monsters that attacked people. His magic was certainly strong enough, but he was still a little scared. His thoughts were interrupted by Kushi, who clarified that if he did agree, she would focus on him. Explained that in addition to the increased fee, he would recommend him for a rank E promotion. With a caustic laugh, she said that the higher the rank, the higher his salary. After weighing everything, Kirito agreed to this, to which she thanked him and said that she couldn't resist the words promotion and salary increase. It was like a balm to her soul. Once outside the capital, the guy saw a beautiful view that spread out before him. Big mountains, green meadows, as well as a bright sun that dazzled him a little with its rays. He spotted the only road that was beyond the wall, and went beyond the horizon. With a guild token and a quest request, he was able to walk outside the city for free, noting that it was good to be adventurous and quite useful. But he also realized that he could just imagine this place and move with magic. In his hands he held a small letter and a pouch of money. The place of delivery was the village of Horan. Realizing that the letter was nothing, but the money was a big responsibility, as it was a more difficult task and required more time and physical strength. Based on the facts, it was probably a test for his rank advancement. He thought about this village again after reading its name. A small cool breeze blew across his face. The weather was beautiful, just right for this kind of work. He noticed the beautiful view in front of him. He had never seen anything like it in his previous life, so he breathed a sigh of relief and decided to go to his destination. He cast a teleport spell and moved forward along the road and realized how much faster it was than traveling by carriage. But there was one thing he didn't specify. The village of Horan was quite far away and it might take a long time to get there. When he heard the sound of birds, he looked up and an idea instantly came into his head, which was that the higher he was, the better his view would be, so he decided to move to the height of a bird's flight, or rather he decided to try to do so. In an instant he appeared in the sky at the height he needed. From surprise he realized that he had succeeded, but not the problem. He began to fall. In an instant he thought about the next point in the sky, to which very quickly moved. With a smile on his face he confirmed that this method worked, and so he continued on his way. As he moved through the sky he noticed that he was flying and even sang a song he knew. But his singing was interrupted by voices that didn't sound human. Lowering his eyes down he saw several goblins. They are one of the main targets in the guild, but this was his first time seeing them live. However, Kushi told him that there are almost no monsters on this road. Here either he is so lucky or she lied to him. Kirito used attack magic only on the barrels. Of course he had no desire to get into a fight with them, but it was very interesting and he decided to do it. As he landed next to the creatures they immediately took notice of him. Green goblins, with horrible facial features. In an instant they began to growl at him. He realized that this would be great practice and just got ready as 3 goblins ran at him in an instant to growl. Kirito concentrated and held his hand out in front of him and cast the slash spell. One of the 3 goblins fell to the ground in 2 different pieces. The remaining goblins didn't like this and in an instant they ran at the guy again shouting something in their goblin language. Kirito in an instant cast the spell Distortion. In an instant, both goblins spun in a spatial vortex and scattered in different parts of the clearing. And with a sigh of relief, the guy said that he had handled them. When he saw Grotesque, he realized that the more he looked at it, the nastier and worse it got. Thinking about the fact that he had never killed an animal before, he began to feel a little guilty. With his mind he knew there was nothing wrong with it. But since it was powerful magic he had to make sure he was really facing an enemy. He thought of the cockroach and decided to keep picturing it in front of him. He sarcastically said that he would cut off his ears for destroying monsters. While he was fighting the goblins, it was starting to get dark outside and the sun was sinking below the horizon. Toward nightfall, he reached the village of Horan. The small village stood behind a brick fence. The houses could be counted on his fingers. Many of the buildings had lights on, but enough people lived there. As we got closer, at the gate stood a guard, a middle-aged man with a little stubble and a spear in his hands. He paid attention to the boy and asked in surprise about the traveler. In the lad's mind, the man looked friendly, correcting the guard that he was an adventurer who had come from the royal capital to fulfill a mission. The guard was surprised that coming from the capital to this village for an assignment was quite unusual. He asked what the guy's mission was, to which he replied to deliver money and letters. The guard also asked who the sender was, to which he read the name Mr. Greg and Taylor on the letter. The man grinned and said he understood who it was and explained that they hadn't been back to this village since they became adventurers. Calling him Mr. Kirito, he said that they often send money to this wilderness, to which the guy only nodded in surprise. Thinking that he was a jolly man, he asked him to ask the guard to escort him to his destination. But the guard said that he was in no hurry. It was already sunset and explained that he would give the delivery tomorrow. He realized that it might not be polite to bother people at dinner, but he didn't care, because with his magic he could move here tomorrow morning. He nodded with understanding, scrolling through the place in his head once more and fully memorizing the outline of the village. He turned around and said goodbye to the guards, but the man stopped him and said there was no place to stay. He put his arm around Kirito's shoulders and said with a smile that he could spend the night at his place. Kirito was shocked and tried to refuse, but the guard's grip and persistence were strong. So he asked him to tell him about the royal capital. The guard and the boy came to a small house, which was decorated with some plants and flowers around the house. When the guard entered the house, he shouted for the family to welcome him. A girl came out of the room, with a pleasant appearance. Her blonde hair was tied in a ponytail. She smiled pleasantly and said welcome back, but looked at Kirito in surprise and asked who the guy was. The guy apologized for the inconvenience and gave his name, saying he was an adventurer. The girl smiled sweetly, saying what a polite guy he was, and introduced herself as Stella, Andre's wife. Kirito looked up at the guard and asked about his name, to which he received a surprised answer if he did not tell him his name. Andre smiled and said who cares and laughed. His wife said that he was in his repertoire as always. The guy apologized and thanked them for letting him sleep over. The guard explained that he should cook dinner for Kirito as well, to which she replied to make him feel at home. The boy apologized to her again for the inconvenience. As Kirito walked down the corridor, he looked around the house. It was quite ordinary, which was the first time he had ever stayed overnight in this world in a house like this. As he passed the stairs to the second floor, there was a shout of joy that his father had come home and a question about a new client. A little girl with big green eyes and blonde hair tied back in a small ponytail appeared from behind the stairs. She was dressed in a pretty dress that matched her eyes, and she had a scarf tied around her neck. It was Andre's daughter, named Nina. The man introduced them to each other. Kirito sat down in front of the girl. He said that he was very pleased to meet her. He also said that he was an adventurer and her kind father allowed her to stay with them for the night. With a happy smile, she too answered him that it was a pleasure to meet him. In Kirito's mind was how cute she was and in everything not a difficult child. But then he was called. Andre grabbed Kirito by the shoulder and with a serious look told him not to dare to touch his sweet daughter with a finger. The guy, shocked and horrified, asked him to let go. In an instant the man was grabbed by his ear, to which he could only cry out in pain. It was Stella. She asked him to stop talking nonsense and help her in the kitchen, to which he howled with words that he understood everything. The boy's mind flashed back to how strong his wife was. The father turned to his daughter and said that Kirito had arrived from the royal capital. The girl looked at him in surprise. With a bright gleam in her eyes, she looked at the boy with joyful surprise and asked again about the royal capital. The girl joyfully started jumping around him. Did he really come from the royal capital? Commenting on it, she said that it was amazing, and mentioned that he must have many different interesting stories. The guy couldn't even form a few thoughts out of surprise, and then a voice came from behind him, asking if everything was all right. Andre's wife appeared behind him and said that their village listened to the adventurers' stories with great interest. He was also asked that if he didn't mind letting him talk to their daughter. The guy agreed and thought about the fact that in this world, too, people are drawn to the big cities. But Nina's father was obviously worried about her and told him not to do anything like that because he was watching him. The thought that her father was a bit strange flashed through his mind. They were invited to the table. There were various dishes on the table, which both looked and smelled beckoning to them. The guy and the girl already started drooling at the food, seeing how delicious it looked. Nina's father took out a bottle of wine and offered it to Kirito, who said he would try it, but only if it wasn't strong. Andre reassured him and told him not to worry about it. They handed him a glass and poured a burgundy-colored wine with a pleasant aroma. Kirito noticed how pleasant and not at all sour the wine smelled, and Andre asked him if he knew anything about wine. He explained that in their village the winemakers were very picky, and that they had the best wine. The boy nodded understandingly. They clinked glasses, saying they were drinking to their health. Taking a sip of the wine, Kirito remarked how rich and full of flavor it was, to which Nina's father confirmed his words. His daughter suggested that he try the salad, because it was also very tasty, because the vegetables came straight from the garden. Stella told him not to be shy, noting that there was enough food for everyone. Kirito looked at her and thanked her with a smile. The boy tasted the food they had prepared and said it was delicious, noting that Stella was a very good cook. She thanked him with a little shyness. Andre remarked that her cooking was the best in the world, to which he was told not to suck up, but he only laughed. A happy and joyful atmosphere filled the room. Everyone was talking and laughing at some jokes. Kirito remembered his mother who died early. He liked the atmosphere in this house. Andre noticed the pensive guy and asked him what was wrong, and he replied that everything was fine and how nice it was to have his own household. The man smiled and suggested that he should try it himself, telling him to stop being adventurous and move to their village. He also mentioned that he would teach him the art of hunting, to which the boy only smiled. He thought about how peaceful and good life was here. Deep night had fallen over the village. Kirito would continue his mission in this village in the morning. In the previous chapters, Futy Kirito was transported to another world by a mysterious creature. Thanks to the magic of space, he performed small quests until he stayed with a family in the village of Horan. It was early morning and the sun's rays were beginning to break through the windows of the houses. Sinking into the soft pillow, the boy dreamed of his past life, but the apt gift of someone's foot quickly brought him to his senses. It was Nina, who slept much more soundly than he did. Rising, he changed into his clothes and went down to the first floor. He was already met in the kitchen by a smiling Stella who wished him a good morning. She asked if he had gotten a good night's sleep, to which Kirito smiled and nodded, and he thanked her for giving him his pajamas. She apologized with a smile on her face for the pajamas being so stretchy. She asked about her daughter, if she was still awake, to which she received a negative answer, explaining that her daughter was sleeping very sweetly, and he did not want to wake her up. She explained that there were no children of her age in the village, and all the young people went to the capital. She said seriously that they were having fun, and also asked him if he had done anything wrong. The guy asked with shock if they were not bored with such things, but remembering her husband's outrage yesterday that Nina wanted to sleep with Kirito to hear more about the royal capital, he asked if there was a problem with Andre, to which Stella smiled and said that everything was fine, and she managed to convince him that everything would be fine. Andre appeared behind him, looking sleep-deprived, and asked him who was worrying too much, to which he said that Nina was his only daughter, and that he was naturally worried. Kirito wished him a good morning, to which he received the same answer. But Andre asked again if he had done anything wrong, to which Kirito replied with shock that he had not. And Stella mentioned that he went out every half hour to look, so it was not necessary to ask. She sent them off to wash up with the words that breakfast was ready and on the table. Kirito looked behind her back and was surprised. There was toast and eggs on the table and some vegetables lying next to it. Kirito realized how delicious it all looked and ran to wash up quickly. Outside, the sun was already high. A slight breeze chased the dust along the road. After breakfast, Andre and Kirito went outside. The boy had to deliver a letter and money to an address where Andre had promised to take him. The guy was thinking about how quiet and peaceful the place was, calling it a peaceful atmosphere. Kirito spoke to the man, saying that the village was very nice and that it felt like time had stopped here. Andre explained that the young people living here find it boring. He said that boredom is a luxury, but Andre said that it depends on each person's point of view, but he liked the phrase, to which the guy said he was giving it. Kirito remembered his world again, which was no wonder how desperate he was in his world. After all, he didn't have a moment there that he didn't feel like he was in that world. People don't realize that this is a boredom they can afford, however, if you think better of it. Kirito had various thoughts popping up in his head. In his thoughts, he thought about how long it had been since he had appeared in this world. But it was only today that he had managed to get a good night's sleep. He also remembered last night, when Nina was surprised that there were so many different races living in the capital. And he said that it was surprising to him too. The girl asked him to tell her something else, to which he sighed and said that he didn't know what else to tell her. She looked at him with surprise. He said that he was new to the capital, but was immediately asked where he was from. Kirito wondered at the question. He began to explain that his home was in a rather distant place. Nina was surprised to hear that it must be hard for him, because his homeland is very far away. The boy said that it was for the best for him. However, the girl said with a smile that he had a lot of fun things in store for him from now on. Kirito was surprised at first, but then looked at her with a smile and nodded. Stopping near a small house, Andre said they were here and pointed to Greg and Taylor's house. The guy asked, a little surprised, that they were neighbors, to which he received a sarcastic reply that they were a sweet couple. Heading towards Andre's house, Andre asked with clarification that she would call the family then, to which Kirito nodded. Two older men appeared in front of Kirito. The man introduced himself as Greg's father and the woman as Taylor's mother. The guy also introduced himself and said he was an adventurer named Kirito and wished them good morning. The guy held out a small baggie and a letter saying he had a delivery for them. They hesitated and asked if it was money, to which the guy said it was. The woman said she was surprised that only letters had come before, to which the man said that maybe it was written in the letter itself. They read the letter thoughtfully and noted that the guy was a rank F adventurer, but that the guild trusted him. Kirito was surprised to hear that it was about him, and he replied yes. They explained that he had been recommended by the guild, and that was why they had decided to deliver the money. The man raised an eyebrow and said that it was probably some sort of lice test. Kirito asked what the lice test meant, which he didn't want, and asked him to double check that the entire sum was there. Kirito replied that all the money was there, given the calculations in the letter. The old men thanked him for coming all this way and asked him to say hello to them if he met their stupid sons. Smiling back at them, he nodded. Once away from the house, Andre asked if he had completed the quest, to which he received a positive answer and thanked them for their help. Andre asked when he would be heading back, to which he received the answer that the job was finished and he would leave now. The man nodded understandingly and said that he was obliged to say goodbye to his family. With a smile he nodded and said he owed him a debt of gratitude. Nina clearly didn't like the news that Kirito was on his way back. However, he said that he would love to stay a little longer, but unfortunately he couldn't. In his mind, his finances weren't stable yet. The girl nodded and held out her hand asking him to come back next time. Kirito nodded back at her with confirmation. He shook her hand in return. Andre hovered over the guy and told him not to even think about driving his wedges at her, to which he said he wasn't even going to. He decided to clarify if they knew what their age difference was. Andre decided to ask him about his age, assuming that he was 18, but before he could say anything, the guy interrupted him and said that he gave him too little age, and said that he was 27 years old, and in his head he couldn't really look that young. Nina's parents were shocked when they found out how old Kirito was and couldn't believe it. Andre mentioned with astonishment that the guy is younger than him by 1 year, and Kirito said that Andre is 28 years old and why he addressed him as you. He also clarified that he thought Andre was much older than him, calling him an old man. The man froze in shock and surprise, responding how rude of him. Kirito explained that no matter how cute their daughter was, he assured them that he would definitely not be tempted by her, to which the parents apologized understandingly. However, this obviously didn't apply to Andre, but there are times when Japanese people can look much younger than their age. Stella turned to Kirito and offered him to take her food if he really liked it so much, to which the boy was surprised, and she clarified that there was still some left over from yesterday, and she put it with him. Thinking that he would have something to eat, he thanked her for the food. As he left the house, she turned to them and thanked them again for their support. A happy Nina waved goodbye and said goodbye. Andre also remarked that he could stay with them next time if he needed to. Kirito waved to them as they walked away. As he walked along the road, he thought about how kind they had been to the strange adventurer, and realized that these people were really nice. Spending time with them made him feel at ease, as if he had become part of their family. However, he thought that if he could continue to live like this, he would have no problem visiting them again. Stretching his back and stretching his arms to the sky, he realized it was time to head back to the guild to turn in the quest. He was happy that he had found a place where he would be told welcome back again. The next day, after parting ways with the family who had invited him for the night, he left Horan village. He was successfully promoted to rank E. There were some advantages to being promoted. The first was that the type and number of quests available to him increased, due to which he could do more quests and save time. The second was easier. He was paid more money for completing quests. Thus he began to earn more than any other adventurer. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice from behind him. 3 tall men with various injuries appeared in front of him. One of them addressed Kirito because he didn't understand what tricks he was using to fulfill so many requests. But if he really is an adventurer, then he should be making money from battle quests. However, all of this was bad for his reputation. He asked them in surprise if there was a rule that he had to take monster slaying quests, to which he replied that it didn't matter. It bothered them that people like Kirito were hanging around easy quests. Tensely, he thought about how to deal with such a situation, because it was useless to talk to such a person. Remembering Kushi's words, he realized that violence and conflict were forbidden in the guild. Trying to get around them, he realized that he had to go into the building, but then he was blocked by a man twice as big as Kirito himself. He asked him where he was going, because they had not finished talking. People started to notice that a fight was breaking out in their circle. A large crowd gathered around them, one side shouting about the fight, the other side betting on the winner. Kirito realized he was in for a real treat. Although fighting was not uncommon here, he had seen it before when he was doing quests. A scuffle broke out and the two were deciding who was the better of the two. Kirito was already thinking of moving to the guild or just running away, though that wouldn't solve his problem. It was obvious that he couldn't win in a normal fight, and spells like cut or distortion couldn't be used in public. But a great idea had occurred to him. If he moved with his opponents, with the current number of people, it would serve as a bit of publicity. Here was the very opportunity to move to the next level of making money. He said the demonstration out loud, but two people came at him and asked him what he was muttering to himself. But Kirito replied sharply that it was none of his business. He explained that he would work as he saw fit and would not adjust to them. He also said that if they didn't like it, they could try to change his mind. His answer shocked the guys, and they said with hatred that that was exactly what they would do. If he thought so, they would just beat him up. With a small wave and the notion that he was in flight, he smiled and asked if they could continue the conversation. However, these guys took to the skies with him, leaving them aghast and confused. However, remembering that he couldn't stay in the sky for long, they began to fall. The guys shouted in fear that they were falling and could turn into a small puddle in the blink of an eye. But Kirito was calm as he was in charge of the process, to which one of them asked with shock and horror why he was so calm. As they continued shouting, they decided to ask him if he had done it, to which he confirmed it with a calm face. He also clarified that if they fell from such a height they would turn into a cake. After asking him if he was going to kill them, they begged him not to do so. As they flew closer to the ground, they apologized to him and begged him to spare them. He exhaled, thinking that they'd gone soft, but in the end he spared them. They landed on the ground with only minor scrapes and bruises. All around them questioned what it was that they were suddenly back, but no one had ever seen magic like that before. Kirito stood in front of the crowd and began to explain that his magic allowed him to travel long distances instantly. The crowd kept asking why he told them this. Some were hearing about it for the first time. But he said that he had a suggestion for them. It carried the meaning of making it easier for them to move around. If it was within his range, he would have no problem getting them to their destination. His livelihood was to move adventurers to the mission and charge them for it. It was a tempting offer since there was no advanced transportation in this world. He could earn more by directly negotiating the delivery fee. Thinking that it was a mutually beneficial offer, all the people in the neighborhood thought about it and didn't understand what he was talking about. However, this is the first time they are encountering this and they are confused as to whether it will be a failure. Someone in the crowd shouted out a phrase just for interest, to which the guy instantly looked at the person with surprise. He was approached by a girl asking what the benefit would be to them and to him. He thought about the fact that it did interest someone. He explained that it would save them time and he could make money moving them to their destination. She asked about the price, to which he said it would depend on the distance. He said that for the first customers he would charge 2 silver coins for moving the group to the mission. The girl hesitated and said that it was too expensive. He thought about the fact that of course it would be more expensive than in a regular wagon, because there they would get back another 2 copper coins, so it was unconvincing that it would be more expensive for them. However, a medium-sized guy came out of the crowd and said that the Thunder Sword group would like to know more about it, if that was okay. Kirito smiled and said he would be all for it. However, the girl started to get indignant and asked this guy what they wanted it for. She called him by the name Reed, however he was skeptical, so he was still thinking about it. Reed turned to the girl and said that if it was true, then thanks to this guy's ability, they would be able to make a big step forward. And when he clarified why he thought that, he suggested to go somewhere else, since talking about such things is not worth it in the center of a crowd. He introduced himself and said his name was Kirito. A tall guy with a few scars introduced himself as Rox, the leader of the Thunder Sword team. The girl who first came out of the crowd was called Alina. She warned him if he deceived them she would kill him. And a small girl with a staff introduced herself as Arna. The guy's name was Reed and he said with a smile that they could get down to business. However, he was stopped by Alina and asked what they needed the jumps for. He said it was simple. He explained that if Kirito sent them to the mission destination, they would be able to do many missions with minimal expense. They were shocked by the price Kirito asked for. They were surprised that for Reed 2 silver coins was a minimal expense. He continued his explanation. First of all, they are always traveling on horseback or in carriages. If you calculate all the expenses, it comes out to 2 silver coins. But when they fail, it takes them even more money for all this. Also, he said through his teeth that Rox and Alina drink a lot, which is also included in their expenses. They instantly calmed down and grinned with fright and froze in awe. Reed also clarified if they were interested in how much money they were spending. Kirito could only sympathize with them. The guy decided to continue explaining to them that if they paid 2 silver for moving, it would save them time and effort, and they could do several high-paying quests a day. The more quests, the more profit. In addition, they don't have to worry about monsters attacking them on the way, thus the workload is greatly reduced. The group members nodded understandingly. Alina put her arm around the guy's shoulder and smilingly apologized to him for being such a bitch. In his head he thought about how fast she had changed her shoes. Reed explained that they should make more money before the other adventurers got wind of it. But if things went that way, then Ranga was just around the corner. Everyone shouted happily about the new target, which is Ranga. They decided to get to work quickly so as not to waste any time. However, their conversation was overheard by a certain guy who had been standing around the corner all this time watching everything that was going on. A guy of medium height, with white hair and a white cloak came out of the corner, and he was very interested in the magic that could be used to move around. Kirito bided his time over a cup of tea, sitting in a small coffee shop. When he noticed the hourglass, he realized that it was time to pick up the boys from the mission. Earlier, by the will of a mysterious entity, Futy Kirito was suddenly transported to another world. With the help of space magic, he became an adventurer and received an offer from the Sword of Thunder group to travel from the royal capital to his destination. Kirito hoped that the group was doing well and no one was hurt. However, a few hours earlier, Reed's group was shocked at how fast they had moved here, literally in a second. Reed also noted that it would have taken them 3 days to get here by wagon. Kirito said he'd been to the Kyoten plane for work. As he'd explained earlier, his magic could only travel to places he'd been to, so the farther the distance, the more he paid. Reed fixed his glasses and said he didn't mind at all, it was much faster anyway. Now he was convinced it was worth it. He held out the payment to Kirito. He thought about the fact that it wasn't a bad income for moving people. He thought that it was time to start the first quest, the gathering of materials, which would take about 2 hours, so he asked Kirito what Kirito would do in the meantime. He said that he would go back to the capital, have a cup of tea and wait for them. The guys were shocked, except for Reed, and surprised. They began to clarify that they would fight and sweat and he would just sit and drink tea, also noting that it was very cleverly done. Kirito remarked that this was the ability, but if he went with them he would only get in their way, which they all thought and confirmed. Arna hid behind the guy's back and wished them good luck. But Alina shockingly clarified that she had decided to sneak out and grabbed her and dragged her behind her. Apparently Arna wanted tea too, noticing how she said the word tea in a long voice. Reed asked to pick them up in about 2 hours. Kirito nodded with a smile and asked them to be careful. Kirito moved over to the guys and before he could say that he was back, a dagger was put to his throat in an instant, much to his horror. But then Alina saw that it was him and stepped away from him. The shocked Kirito asked her what he had done to her, mentioning that he almost had a heart attack. But she blamed him for that, blaming it on the fact that he had appeared too suddenly in front of her. The guy thought that next time he should move a little farther away. He also decided to ask her how the monster slaying went, to which he received a positive answer that everything was fine. She remarked that it had gone well, pointing to Rox who was sitting on a bound monster that was stunned. In his head, this was exactly what he had expected from the rank B adventurers. Looking at the parchment, he decided to look at the next destination. However, Reed interrupted him and decided to ask him something. He asked if they could leave their luggage with him for safekeeping, for a fee, of course. Behind Reed's back, a girl named Arna was begging to be taken home. That way they could gather more material. Kirito thought about the offer. Kirito realized that it was very reasonable that the more quests they took, the more materials they would collect, thus their luggage would become larger. Thus the luggage storage system for adventurers would be very convenient, making even more money. Kirito agreed and said it would cost 3 bronze coins. Reed agreed and said it would help them a lot. The guy asked him for a small bag of regular size. Reed was surprised and said of course he would be given a bag. Through the magic of space, he made a vault for them, to which he said it was ready, and they could put their materials away. With incomprehension on their faces, Rox, Lena and Arna asked how this was even possible. Kirito turned his attention to them and asked what was wrong with them. Reed noticed that they recognized his abilities, even though his magic was too much. Without thinking long, the guy suggested they go to the next quest in the Forest of Galore. Thus, the journey to the Forest of Galar, which would have taken about 4 days in a carriage, was overcome in a blink of an eye. Thunder Sword's group returned to the capital on the same day, having completed 2 quests, which was impossible before. Pouring out the money they had earned on the table, Reed realized that it was even more than he had expected. 6 silver coins was clearly worth it. Kirito smiled and remarked that he was glad he could help them, but the whole group looked at him in confusion. It was clear from his look that he was about to leave. Reed apologized to him, for he had been suspicious of him at first, but his ability was exactly as he had said. The whole group smiled at how nice he was and that they could use such a reliable person in the group. Rox suggested that he join them, which Alina said was a great idea, but Kirito refused and explained that he wasn't going to be an adventurer for long. He also said that he was willing to help them with his abilities at any time. The Thunder Sword were his first customers and there was a discount for them. Rox nodded with a smile and understanding. In an instant the girl hit the guy and asked him not to talk about it with a satisfied face, to which Rox cried out in pain. Everyone agreed to continue working with Kirito. Around them, some began to whisper that they had returned from their assignment too quickly. They say to earn a name, you have to earn a reputation first. It had been weeks since his new job. Everyone who had doubted Kirito's abilities began to approach him one by one. The number of clients began to increase, making his work stable. Eventually, he named his services the Transference Service, but he didn't realize what would come of it. When he entered the guild building, he approached Kushi and she grudgingly explained that the guild was in a state of emergency because of him. Kirito was expecting anything, but Kushi was dragged away by another girl, and the guy asked her not to call him by that name. The girl said that the second name was proof that the adventurer was popular, but Ms. Kushi didn't think so and tried her best to get away. Ms. Kushi still broke free and approached him, telling him to slow down the transfer of adventurers, because of the high demand and high speed of the assignments that they do not have time to process requests. However, Kirito was approached by the head of the guild the other day and praised him for his high completion rate and thanked him. But the girl was very displeased and pounded her fist on the counter. She lowered her head and grudgingly continued talking. She asked to forget everything that the head had told her, because this old man very rarely appeared in the guild and did not fulfill his duties. She also asked Mr. Kirito to listen to her, that if he continued like this, the entire staff would die of overwork. She was clearly trying to intimidate him. In the end, Mr. Kirito said he understood and apologized. Walking out of the building, he never thought it would come to this. However, he couldn't force Kushi and the others to work their asses off. He understood all too well the value of a corporate slave. It was also something he had noticed all along, that his magical power was not at all infinite. He began to feel something like fatigue and decreasing mana as he repeatedly carried groups of people and stored their luggage in the vault. Remembering that he was taking a break, he decided to use it to think about other business. Suddenly, someone called out to him from behind, nicknamed Transfer Service. A guy of very interesting appearance stood in front of him. He said hello to him. It popped into Kirito's head that he had a similar appearance to a Hollywood actor. He nodded and asked who he was, to which he received an apology for being rude. He introduced himself as Emilio, a merchant doing business in the royal capital. He also introduced the man standing next to him as his employee named Rodney. Kirito clarified what he wanted from him, to which Emilio decided to get right down to business and offered to be his partner. Kirito, due to shock, didn't know what to say. Kirito apologized and said that he was not one of those and he was not interested in such a topic, so he should not impose his orientation. The shocked boy clarified that by partner he meant something else entirely. Kirito breathed a sigh of relief and said that he had confused him, to which the guy said that they should forget about it. Emilio offered him a job at his company, and the guy was surprised to hear him ask about joining his company to do the transfer. He got an affirmative answer. Emilio said he'd noticed his strength long ago, and also noticed how he'd gotten to Ob Forest in no time, though it would have taken about a week and a half to travel by wagon. He said that by using his powers to sell and buy goods, they could easily make a profit, but he must have figured that out on his own. This guy seemed to have studied Kirito well. He seemed like a meticulous and careful person, to which the guy said he was going to make money that way himself. A pleased Emilio smiled and said how much it simplifies everything and asked him again about his offer, but Kirito tried to stop him. He decided to find out the name of this company, to which Emilio nodded and said the name. He mentioned that Kirito had probably figured it out himself, but the company was called Emilio's Company, and he was the head of it. The guy apologized and said it was the first time he had heard of such a company. Emilio asked in surprise if he had visited the capital's market stall. Kirito replied that he had and was going to sell his services there, but the guy crossed his arms in front of him and said he had it written all over his face. Kirito said in surprise that it sounded very rude. Emilio smiled and said that it wasn't surprising that he didn't know about his company since it was only recently founded. He decided to clarify with him that he was probably disappointed to learn that the company was very young. The guy explained to him that he was going to join a bigger company, to which he got a nod. Emilio confirmed that it wasn't bad, but it wasn't the best option. He said that he didn't recommend him to work in a big company, and Kirito looked at him in surprise and asked why. He got an explanation. It was an unnecessary burden for him. The bigger the company, the more he would be tied to it, and Kirito's earnings would be divided among many people. He specified that it was because he was afraid of losing his freedom that he never joined any group, and instead he chose to work as a mercenary, calling it a transfer service. He decided that he wouldn't like being in a big company, to be a cog in a big machine. Kirito wondered who this guy was, how long he had been following him. He continued to listen to Emilio about how his company was much better at this, with only 2 employees at this point, and he wasn't going to force him into a job, noting that he could do it whenever he wanted. He also said he would pay him a decent salary. The guy decided to clarify about the sales channels, if there are any at all, to which he received the answer that he did not worry about it, saying that he already had some necessary network. Kirito also asked about the initial capital, but Emilio sighed, calling him a rather cautious man. He handed him a money bag with 50 gold coins in it. Kirito thought about using it to build a small house in the capital. In his head he thought that not everyone could afford such a sum of money. He was obviously not telling him the truth. He agreed, saying that he had the money to buy goods, but Emilio specified that it was an advance if he accepted his offer. Such an amount of advance per month greatly shocked Kirito. He was even more shocked when he was told that it was a payment per day. Emilio explained that this was all he would be able to pay him for now. The scale was very small, but in time the scale would increase and so the profit would increase. Kirito asked if he was sure, to which he replied in the affirmative. He said he could make a lot more money with Kirito's help, to which he struck a self-righteous pose, and Rodney just clapped his hands together. In his head, the boy was thinking about how he had so much confidence in him. Kirito's thoughts were interrupted by Emilio asking if he was willing to work with him. Kirito thought about the fact that if Emilio failed, he wouldn't risk anything and it was a pretty lucrative offer for him. Maybe he should start small and make the company bigger. Also, a guy named Emilio was very interested in him, to which he agreed and reached out to shake hands. Emilio asked if they could switch to you, to which he agreed and they shook hands. Emilio's company was now officially formed. When he left the house, Kirito saw Emilio carrying boxes. He wished him a good morning and asked if he was ready to go into business, to which he replied positively. He also said good morning to Rodney, but he only nodded. Emilio said not to take Rodney's attitude to heart, noting that he was very shy. Emilio decided to ask if he'd slept well today and if he'd gotten a good night's sleep. Kirito said he'd gotten a good night's sleep. The boy remarked that the store was completely empty, to which Emilio replied that he had just bought it. However, it would soon be completely full, so that even the other stores would be no match for it. Kirito realized that he had his doubts about the whole thing. Emilio turned to the guy with a question that he wanted to clarify something with him. He asked what he wanted to know, to which he asked about his abilities. Emilio asked him if his transfer magic had any limitations and how far he could carry luggage. He had heard that he had a magical vault and would like to see it in action. He explained that this way he could easily understand where to focus his business. Kirito didn't understand what he wanted to know, since he had already explained everything to him. He clarified that he had done the same research, so he knew everything about his abilities. Emilio wrote down in his notebook that Kirito could go anywhere in the world in an instant. What was the point of asking about it if he already knew everything? But he didn't stop and asked to see his vault, to which Kirito agreed. In an instant and with a wave of his hand, a large black hole appeared near them, to which the guy decided to clarify whether nothing would happen to his goods in such a vault. And in his mind, Kirito remembered how he said it was safe. He explained that he had stored other people's luggage there many times, as well as food that didn't spoil. Emilio asked what it meant that if you carried food there, it would always stay fresh. Kirito explained and gave the example of fish, that one could buy fresh fish in the port and sell it in the capital. Emilio pointed out that this is a good idea, but putting it on the market is a bad idea because the commoners will avoid the product obtained in an unusual way. If they briefly explain the situation to the upper class, they could sell it at a higher price. Kirito's mind flashed with the thought that he had already figured out how to maximize the profit from it, which means that his head is working well. Emilio said he had to get the goods into his vault as soon as possible. When he saw the volume that needed to be moved into the storage room, he was shocked. The guy asked about the wagon, thinking that he would have to get one in every town. Emilio asked about his mumbling to himself and told him not to say that it was impossible to do so. In an instant, Kirito moves the entire cart into his vault, to which Emilio and Rodney were very shocked. The guy confirms that everything is fine and that there will be no problem moving it. But at one point Emilio laughed, but not his usual laugh. Kirito was shocked and said how surprised he was. Emilio apologized for his laughter while wiping his tears. He also said that his magic was very impressive, and Emilio said that it was not for nothing that he had approached him. Kirito realized that this laughter was not particularly well intentioned. However, Emilio clarified that his magic would be very good for transporting contraband, to which Kirito was greatly surprised and objected to that. Emilio was taken aback and said he was joking and that even without taking that risk there was a lot of money to be made. Kirito asked him not to joke like that anymore. Replying that he understood, he suggested that he get to work. The village of Donker stretched across green fields. A joyful Emilio couldn't believe that they had actually moved instantly to Donker. In his thoughts, Kirito wondered if he was tired of reacting so emotionally to everything. The guy asked him a question about what they had come here for, and he asked him if he hadn't already figured it out, since he had been here before. The guy said it was only for work. Emilio decided to explain to him. At the moment they were near the border of Matic country, where trade was very lively. He decided to clarify if he knew what products this country supplies. Well, Kirito said he did. He listed that this country supplies various spices and dried fish, as well as delicate fabrics. Emilio confirmed this, and said that the price of these goods in Donker was almost the same as in Matic, explaining in other words that they would buy these goods at a cheap price. Kirito asked where the price difference came from. Emilio explained that there were a lot of mountains and various unpleasant monsters on the side of the royal capital. That's why merchants and travelers try to ignore this village. Surprisingly, almost no one knows about it. Merchants also prefer to pay tolls and go straight to Matic than to go here. The boy understood what he was saying and nodded back. He didn't notice it last time he delivered the letter, but Emilio knows a lot of things that ordinary people don't even realize, and it even scared Kirito a little. However, Kirito clarified that they would buy rare goods at a cheap price and sell them at a high price where they were in short supply. Emilio answered him that buy cheaply and sell expensively. This was the basics of business. However, it was difficult to put this principle into practice. The guy saw Kirito looking at him in surprise, then said with a smile that with his magic it would be much easier. Emilio waved his hand and said that they should go shopping quickly, since the local market is not as big as the one in Matic. After this market, they would go to another location. Kirito felt that it was from this point onwards that he would have a lot of work to do. That's how things got wrapped up with their business. Their trading company started, just like Emilio said. He had to move all over the country, to places that sold food, crafts, textiles, medicines, and monster materials that could only be found there. Kirito bought specialized goods at a cheap price to sell them where they were needed most. However, Emilio was quick to extract information and flexible to different situations. His appearance and communication skills came in handy. Kirito did not have time to turn around and their company grew and became famous throughout the country. However, the following happened. After 3 months, their store became popular in the royal capital. In the building was no longer dusty places, did not hang cobwebs, but on the contrary, everything shone beyond recognition. Kirito walked through the city and thought about how they had achieved such a result in 3 months, considering that there were more employees. The good thing was that only a few employees knew about him. Recently, the growth of their company had become so high that there were rumors that there was no product that Emilio's company could not get its hands on. However, if they continue in this vein, the company will become so stable and reliable that it won't even be hampered by Kirito's departure. The guy's business acumen never ceased to amaze him, thinking about the fact that he seemed to have awakened the Kraken in him. Cautiously knocking on the door, Kirito clarified with Emilio that he was coming in. There was a guy sitting at a desk, pensively sorting through some papers. Without looking up at the guy, he said hello and welcomed him back, addressing him by his first name. Kirito said he had brought the goods Mr. Zarm had obtained, to which he asked him to put them in the storeroom. Kirito deftly stacked the items, mentioning that such ore could only be mined in Valerio's volcano, to which Emilio tapped a stack of papers on the table and said he couldn't do without his help. However, the boy said that there was no need for his magic anymore, since he only delivered rare items that were hard to get. Emilio asked with a chuckle if he missed the old days, to which he remembered the countless transfers, overtime work, and wild fatigue. The guy asked not to remind him of the past. Emilio explained that with a salary like his it was a sin to complain, because he deserved the money and it was all natural. Emilio clarified that that was the end of it and that his cash award was on the table. Kirito looked at him worriedly and asked if he had too much work to do. He explained that he was still relying on him heavily, which went against his original promise not to tie Kirito down. Kirito immediately realized what was going on and said that he had asked for freedom, but that he shouldn't push himself too far. With a smile, Emilio clarified if he was willing to work for the company for the rest of his life. Kirito asked with shock when he had said that. The guy said it was a pity. Wasn't he going to dedicate his life to the company? Kirito thought in his head that of course he wasn't going to do that. Emilio suddenly thought about it. He decided to clarify whether he had earned enough for himself. After all, the company's profits were growing higher every day. But instead of a big salary, he decided to choose to enjoy a quiet life. At which Kirito hesitated for a moment. But Kirito did not utter a word. He had nothing to say. Emilio said that it was up to him to decide. But as for Emilio himself, he had a goal to make this company the best in the world. And he would be very happy if Kirito would help him with it. It was evening. Some of the streets of the city remained lively because of the various pubs. Kirito walked past the various stores, houses, and thought about that conversation with Emilio. Something was bothering him about him. He remembered that once he was in the other world, he was floating along, not thinking about what would happen next. The only thing he was doing was making money, and gradually he forgot what he wanted to do. But his original goal was something else. Kirito was deep in his thoughts. He accidentally bumped some guy's shoulder, but he apologized immediately. He realized that he needed to think it over, but not in some pub or cafe, but somewhere quiet where no one would bother him. When he looked up, he saw the tower with the balcony. Remembering the shape of that balcony, he moved there in a flash. He remembered how long it had been since he had been here, since his first day in this world. Remembering what the creature had said about using magic, he smiled as he watched the small commotion of the night streets. In retrospect, he began to realize that his job in the guild or transfer service wasn't so bad. He had met a lot of good people at that point. And even Emilio, even though he was a bit strange, he was not without talent. And as a boss, he had no flaws. Kirito couldn't say that he didn't like his current job. However, he didn't get close to many people in the old days. He had lost his mother early on, so he was afraid that it might happen again. So he preferred not to make close ties with anyone. But after losing his father, he realized that now he was left without anyone close to him. Closing his eyes, he thought about how he was doing much better than before. But even with Emilio, they had more of a business relationship. He thought about friends and deep relationships with people. This city reminded him of home, a place where he could feel at ease. In an instant, Nina, that guard's daughter, appeared before his eyes. He remembered her asking if he would come back again. Images of different moments spent with that family flashed before his eyes. He remembered how they had said goodbye, and it made him feel very warm. He remembered the village called Horin, the family that wanted to see him again. More and more vivid images from that evening. He realized that he wanted to live in the village of Horin, and that he didn't mind living a quiet life there. But he couldn't leave Emilio's company. He still needed Kirito's help, if he could. He was surprised to realize that he could use the magic of space, which allowed him to live in two places at the same time, both in the village and in the royal capital. Kirito realized that it would be a two-base life. He was already tired of being alone, and the guy wanted to live a happy life, value his connections with people, and do whatever he wanted. Clarifying that this wasn't why he was given such a power, to which he firmly and clearly made up his mind. Rolling over the idea of living on two bases and traveling with magic was what he needed. He had finally found the life he wanted to live. Previously, Futy Kirito had obtained the skill of space magic, thanks to which he could move around using that magic. It occurred to him to live on two bases, earning money in the royal capital and vacationing in the countryside. The weather was nice today. Someone's glorious singing could be heard along the street on the main road. It was a child singing, picking flowers and making a wreath out of them. In an instant, a familiar silhouette appeared on the road. The girl eyed it warily. Kirito waved and said hello with a smile. But the girl looked at him in surprise, not realizing who it was. He asked her if she remembered him, since he had been to this village before. He told her that they had dined together and he had stayed the night. He also mentioned how she had asked him about the royal capital. She continued to only stare in surprise. The guy had already lowered his gaze with sadness that she didn't remember him. However, she remembered him and immediately started jumping around him with joy, asking him what he was doing here, if he was here for work again. She also asked how he was doing and offered to stay the night again. Kirito breathed a sigh of relief. He sat down on the grass and said thank God. Nina asked him if everything was alright, to which she replied in the affirmative and explained that he had been here once and was afraid that they had forgotten him. Nina shouted that she hadn't forgotten about him, to which he said with a smile that her father Andre hadn't forgotten him either. However, he was just afraid that they had forgotten about him, to which Nina said she would never forget him. She recalled the day he arrived and said with a smile that she had a lot of fun back then. She thanked Kirito for keeping his promise and coming to visit them again, to which he said that she was the one to thank. When they got to the house, her mother Stella was outside and was surprised to hear that he was back. Kirito smilingly greeted her and said how long it had been since they had seen each other. She replied positively that she was happy to see him too. Andre was in his repertoire and pointed at his wife saying that he told her, but she didn't believe him. Stella looked down and said that there was no work in their village. The guy just left. Andre asked him if he would stay the night, to which Kirito replied that he would if he was not in their way. Stella smiled and said that they would have to get the bed ready. Nina took Kirito by the cape and told him he would be staying in her room, to which her father grudgingly said that was unacceptable. She asked the same questions as last time and her father gave her similar answers. Kirito thought with a smile that they hadn't changed at all. Kirito watched it all with a smile and realized how warm and familial it was. Stella asked Andre if there would be any problems because he had left his post, to which he affirmatively said that another guard had taken his place as soon as they met and realized that it would be for a long time. Kirito was thinking that he liked this village for a reason. Andre asked him what he was doing in the village, if he was on a delivery quest again, but Kirito said no. He answered that he had decided to settle here, and with surprised faces they asked him again. Andre said that it was great and they could go fishing together. Nina was happy that she could play with him every day. Kirito didn't expect to be so welcome here. Stella asked the father and his daughter to calm down. Stella explained that she was happy about it, but clarified what was wrong with his work. Andre also joined the conversation and noted that the style of his clothes was the same, but the quality of the fabric was much better, and asked about his business in the capital. Kirito explained that he was making money by trading and was not going to give it up, and the man listened with interest. He also explained that he would not be able to do business here, so he would continue to work in the royal capital. Stella and Andre looked at him questioningly and with surprise. Kirito said that he understood their confusion, but he said that it would be hard to believe, but that his magic would allow him to continue working in the capital, explaining that this skill would allow him to live in 2 places at once. Andre clarified that you can't move in an instant, to which the guy said with a smile that you can. Andre tried to calm him down and said that it was the first time he had heard of such magic, but the guy explained that it wasn't surprising at all. He offered to show his magic clearly, and Andre and Stella looked at the guy in surprise. He said that he would take them to the royal capital. Nina liked this idea, but Andre clarified how much he was drunk from 1 glass of wine. In an instant, they were already standing in the middle of the street of the royal capital. Their surprise was beyond words. They were both horrified and shocked at the same time. Andre cried out in amazement about what was going on and how it had happened. Stella looked up and saw the large towers of Zeral's castle, which she inhaled and exhaled, and confirmed that it was indeed the royal capital. Nina's eyes lit up and she couldn't believe her eyes, saying that it was amazing and that it was the real royal capital. Nina smiled all the time, mentioning how big the buildings were and how many people there were. Kirito thought about how flexible her childlike psyche was. Andre still couldn't believe everything that was happening and assumed it was a dream, to which Stella offered to pinch him, which she did. He cried out from the unpleasant pain. Andre held his cheek and asked to bring them back home. Kirito agreed and thought about what a poor man Nina's father was. Back home in no time, the man started touching everything with the words "home sweet home." Nina was surprised to ask why they were back home so quickly, since she was just getting the hang of it. Kirito apologized and said that he would move her there some other time. She swept up his words and said she was catching his drift. In the guy's mind was how smart she was for her age. Andre said understandingly that he understood what Kirito's magic was and how it worked. Nina's father also clarified with the boy that he wanted to live in 2 places at once and said that was a great idea. He also said that it would cost a lot of money. Kirito said he didn't have to worry about that, mentioning that he made good money. Andre asked him what the city slop was and he also sighed and said he'd be happy about it. Nina and Kirito looked at him in surprise. The man happily told him welcome to the Horan village and said he really hoped they would live amicably. He suggested that if there were any problems he could come to him. Stella said that it was something to celebrate, to which Nina happily confirmed that she agreed. Andre said with a thoughtful face that he would have to cook something tasty for dinner. His daughter said with a smile that she would help, and her father praised Nina and said he would have a drink with Kirito, but Stella noticed that he was already drunk. Kirito smiled broadly with happiness on his face and agreed, saying that they could continue to live like this. And so another day passed. In a family atmosphere, warmth filled the house. Kirito was happy that he had a small family, though not his own. In previous chapters, with this magic, one can live both in the countryside and in the royal capital. After losing his last family member and being left alone, Kirito is transported to another world by the will of a mysterious entity that grants him the ability of spatial magic. After receiving a quest in the capital's guild, the protagonist moved to the picturesque village of Horin and met Nina's family. Having learned about Kirito's abilities, local merchant Emilio offers him to work for him. Their firm grows rapidly thanks to Kirito's skill. The protagonist realizes that he once again wishes to visit the village of Horin and see Nina's family. Kirito's spatial magic allows him to move freely, so it occurs to him to settle in Horin village while still working in the capital. He returns to the village and reunites with Nina's family. Now he has to find a new home. As he walked outside, a cool breeze blew across Kirito's face and he yawned as sleep still lingered. But he realized that he had had too much to drink last night. The clear sky was a reflection of Kirito's state of mind, and the weather was still nice outside. Kirito realized in his head that the air outside was good and the scenery was beautiful. He had chosen to live in this village for a reason. Being in a different world, he could finally relax. It was the best choice he had ever made. Enjoying the weather, he realized that he had to think of a place to live. At the same moment, Nina came at him from behind and hugged him. Kirito sagged a little from shock and a little pain. After wishing each other good morning, she asked what they would do today, to which the guy said he didn't know yet. Nina suggested he look at the cherry blossoms or take a walk along the creek. Kirito thought for a while. Her father came out of the house, looking as if he had been run over by a wagon. Kirito wished him good morning, and Nina asked him what was wrong. Andre said they were standing too close together and realized he had to find a house. Kirito decided to clarify with the man how to get a house in this village. Andre was surprised and asked again incomprehensibly. The guy explained that in the capital city you had to get citizenship first, and then buy a house from a real estate agency. Then it was necessary to submit the documents to the town hall and also clarified how it happens in the village. He was told that there was no bureaucracy in the countryside. Kirito wondered what was replacing it here. Andre remembered that he needed the permission of the village headman. Then he could live in an empty house or build a new one on an empty plot. Kirito was very surprised and asked if that was all there was to it, to which Andre clarified that this was the way it was done in the villages. There was nothing complicated about it, but he wondered if he would even be allowed to do it. The man asked if he was afraid that he would not be accepted because it was too sudden. The guy sighed and said that he was judging by his words. Andre assured him not to worry, saying that he was his own guy and that he would vouch for him, mentioning that he wasn't some vagrant and that he had delivered a money order here before. Andre didn't think the headman would turn him down. Kirito nodded understandingly. Nina said with a smile that she would also put in a good word for him. The boy thanked her, to which Andre said that they should have breakfast first, because he already smells a wonderful aroma, to which his daughter and the boy agreed. After a hearty breakfast, they went to the headman's house. His house was similar to the others but different in architecture. The headman nodded and said that he understood the situation. The village headman's name was Leroy. Leroy approached him and told him that he had magical powers. Kirito apologized for scaring him. Apparently, he had already shown him the essence of his magic. Nina said with a serious face that she was the one who wanted to move, to which her father told her that it was too early for her to do so. Leroy nodded and clarified that after getting to know him better and getting Andre's recommendation, he had no reason to refuse. The boy thanked him with a smile, but that wasn't all. The headman decided to ask him one question. With interest, he asked why he had chosen this particular village. If he wanted a place with peace and quiet, there were better villages, especially with his magic. He had plenty of opportunities. Kirito turned to Andre and Nina and tried to explain what was wrong, sighing with a little sadness. Kirito told them that he didn't have a family or a place to call home until he got here. He lived completely immersed in his work, and then he remembered the words of his father who told him to live the life he wanted. Andre and the others had been so kind to him, even though to them he was an unfamiliar adventurer. They said they would always be happy to have him here. It was because of this warm and familial atmosphere that he had decided to stay here rather than somewhere else. He explained that he wanted to settle here and that this was the life he wanted to live. The headman nodded and said he understood his motive. Leroy also remarked that he was glad he had such a good opinion of their village, and welcomed him, saying that he was now the new resident of Horin village. Kirito breathed a sigh of relief and reassured himself that everything had gone very well. Nina was pleased and said with a smile that she was glad he had been accepted. The boy remarked that the headman was indeed a good man. Kirito noticed and asked Nina why her father was walking slowly behind them, to which she whispered in his ear that her father was embarrassed because Kirito said he liked them. The two of them glanced at each other and the boy called him modest, to which he replied that it wasn't true at all, just that no one said such things to his face. Kirito realized that such confessions are really not often heard, and his father asked him to forget about it. The headman gave the boy permission to stay in the village and gave the keys to the empty houses to Andre. He offered to walk through the empty houses. He also said that he should think about what he wanted to do, whether to build a new house or to make repairs. He hesitated, questioning whether he should build a house from scratch, as he wanted to move in as soon as possible. He could choose a more expensive house. He thought that he could also consider renovation. At the moment, they were in the center of the village, and Andre suggested they start there. They came to the first house, which was not very big, and Andre noticed that it was old, but it was well maintained and they could move in right away. Kirito nodded thoughtfully. The boy liked the house and said that the house was not bad, but he would like it to be bigger. Nina's father smiled at that and said that he'd started with a lesser option on purpose, but since it was in the center of the city he could get anywhere. But remembering his abilities, he mentioned that such a small thing wouldn't please the guy. He just nodded and Andre suggested to look at a house in the mountains. Kirito liked the idea, and they continued on their way, going around a lot of different houses, hitting different ones from those made of wood to brick cottages. They considered many different criteria, both from the area and the comfort and condition of the house. Andre decided to ask if he liked any of them, to which Kirito said they were all good. The usual logistics were a deciding factor, but not in his case. There were more and more options, and as Kirito held his head in his hands, he realized how many houses they'd passed and didn't know where to stop. Andre said there was one last house left. The guy gave him a surprised look and at the same moment they set off. He also apologized that they had wasted a lot of time on him, but Nina's father said not to worry as he said he would help. When they got closer, they saw a medium-sized house that was attractive. Kirito looked at it with surprise. He liked it. Nina specified that their house was visible from the hillside. Andre had noticed that it was practically in the neighborhood, and he didn't feel comfortable suggesting it right away. Kirito decided to ask if anyone lived there or not. The man explained that the owners had moved out 3 months ago, and Kirito smiled wryly when he said that he had been too shy to ask him to be his neighbor, to which Andre asked him to be quiet. The guy laughed and said that it was a mistake not to suggest it, because it was great to be neighbors. He also said that he looked much more attractive than the previous options. Andre took his head and asked what the hell he was saying with such a beautiful text, to which the guy offered to come into the house, in response to which he received that now only the door will be opened. Once inside the house, the sun illuminated all the rooms. From the outside it looked very neat and cozy. A spacious living room, a light-colored corridor that led to the kitchen, and a staircase that led to the second floor. Kirito noticed that the living room was really big, and Andre said that a large family had lived here before, so he wondered if the house was too big for him. The guy smiled and said it would be fine for him, since he was a cleaner and it wasn't a problem for him. The thought flashed in his head that he could make a small warehouse here. He was called by Nina, who was already on the stairs, and invited Kirito to look at the second floor. With a smile, he followed her. He noticed a couple more rooms. He thought that the house was really a bit big for him alone, but he had already found a solution, that he could either make a storage room or put guests in one of the rooms. Before he had time to look through the rooms, Nina called him again, but already on the first floor. He didn't have time to run after her. Here she showed him the back exit, from which the view of nature spreads out, which Nina immediately noted that it is very cool. The girl explained with a smile that there was a stream nearby, and that if you listened closely you could hear the sound of water. They both listened, and heard a small stream of water rushing through the forest and fields. Kirito noted that she knew a lot about this house. She noted that she used to play with the children of the owners who used to live here. He suggested that in nice weather they could put a chair here and enjoy the nature. Andre came out and confirmed that he liked it too, and that he goes out in the backyard, builds a small fire, eats melted cheese and sausages and drinks ale. Kirito is shocked and says it sounds amazing. After thinking it over, he decides that he's going to stay here. Andre asks if he's sure, to which he replies that the house is perfect for him. Andre and Nina looked at each other with a smile. Andre said with a smile that he would inform the headman. Kirito was very happy that he had found a good house here. The next day, the guy called the workers who came to finish the house. Andre decided to ask him if he would do a major renovation, to which he received the answer no. He was satisfied with everything in the house, specifying that he would change a little kitchen and hallway so that they were a little similar to his home. Kirito thought only about how he wanted to move here as soon as possible. Andre exhaled and said that once everything was settled, they could go fishing together. The boy asked about fishing and said that it was great. However, with his skill he could get to a mountain stream in a flash, but Kirito reminded him that he could only go where he had been. Kirito was enjoying life in the village, thinking about how nice it was, but suddenly remembered that he was going to the capital today to report on the situation, to which Andre nodded understandingly with a little sadness. Andre also noted that he had been here for a few days and wondered if he would be fired. The guy said that it was a pretty flexible job and so he shouldn't be. However, he thought that he was too relaxed in the village and didn't even think about the fact that work might be busy. He decided that if he was going there he could look for furniture. Kirito said goodbye and offered to go fishing when he got back. With a casual look he watched the boy scatter in the air, and said that his magic was amazing every time. But then from behind he heard Nina's voice calling for Kirito. Her father explained to her that he had returned to the capital, to which the girl said that boredom had caught up with her again. Kirito appeared in the capital in a blink of an eye. The boy stretched and said to himself how long it had been since he had walked the streets of the capital. He was surprised at how lively the streets were. Kirito decided that first he should visit Emilio to see if everything was okay, and the furniture could wait for now. He walked along the streets thinking about the delicious lunch he had at a cafe in the capital. Rodney appeared in front of Kirito and said hello, startled. He asked him what he was doing here and told him not to scare him like that again. Emilio told him that Kirito would be back soon, so he told him to wait here. The boy said it was terrifying and wondered if he could anticipate his movements. Kirito asked if there was any urgent work to be done, and Rodney replied that he didn't know, so he decided to ask Emilio himself and asked if Rodney was going with him. Having gotten into Emilio's company through magic, he appeared with Rodney in Emilio's office and said hello to him. Rodney looked serious and asked who was back, to which Kirito said he'd warned him he'd be gone, which Emilio confirmed. Emilio explained that he'd been there a lot longer than he'd expected, and Kirito apologized to him and said he'd gotten a little carried away. He said that he didn't have any urgent business to attend to. He was just worried about him because of his long absence. Emilio asked him if he had found a place where he could enjoy life and asked for details. After telling him about his new home and the idea of living in two different places, Emilio was a little surprised and said that there was definitely something to it. Kirito said that he had always dreamed of a big house in the countryside, and that Horin village was a beautiful place with a lot of nice people. The boy said he thought it was the right decision. Emilio looked at him with a smile and said that he even looked better, noting that living between the two bases was a real pleasure for him. If it was seriously his decision, he would honor it. Kirito said he wasn't going to kill himself for the firm, but he didn't want to lose his job either. Emilio confirmed that that was enough. Emilio explained that their company is expanding every day, so there will always be orders that only he can fulfill. Kirito nodded understandingly. The guy looked up at Kirito and said that since he was going to live on two bases, he would need a house in the capital. The boy looked at him questioningly and said there was enough to live on. Emilio was indignant and shouted that he should have a house of his own. He explained that if he lived in a hotel, he wouldn't know when he'd be back. Besides, he wouldn't let Rodney wait for him outside every time. But if he waited for him inside, the innkeepers wouldn't like it, and he wouldn't want to ruin his relationship with them. However, if Kirito had his own house in the capital, he could wait for him as long as he wanted there, to which the guy thought for a moment and agreed to such a thing. Pointing a finger at Kirito, he affirmatively said that if he was going to live on two bases, then let him get a second house. Now the boy understood what Emilio meant, to which he smiled and confirmed his words. He also suggested that he hire a servant to deliver messages, to which Kirito was very surprised. However, Kirito said that a servant would be too much and declined. He realized that he had earned enough already, but the proletarians were not used to such luxuries. He also thought that he should not get involved in it, because he was not a bourgeois. But then Emilio decided to ask if he could keep two houses clean enough. He explained that even with one house he would have a hard time cleaning, mentioning that his house was obviously not small. If he didn't use it regularly, a week would be enough time for it to get dirty, especially if he has two. It would be difficult for him to maintain two houses in frequency by himself, to which Kirito replied that he was indeed right. Emilio smiled and asked if he agreed. He also said that if he was going to have a house here, he should hire servants for it. Emilio thought about it and said that it was a good idea, and that there was nothing wrong with it, and thanks to his connections he would be able to buy the property at a discount. He also reassured him, saying that he would also take care of the servants. Kirito also noticed in his thoughts that he did not even hide this factor. He thought about the house in the royal capital and walked down the street. The boy thought that Emilio had gotten too excited, and he was getting a bad feeling. He also remembered that he still hadn't bought furniture for the house in Horin. However, Emilio was right about something, but at least he had good connections. But in the end he decided to proceed to look around the house. While walking in his thoughts he didn't notice the girl and hit her shoulder accidentally. He apologized and asked if everything was alright, to which the girl also apologized to him in return. Kirito noticed how beautiful and well dressed she was if she was an aristocrat. It seemed that Kirito's life in his new home in the royal capital would be different from what he had imagined. The day came to inspect Kirito's new home, but when he saw it, he was shocked and denied everything. He saw a huge mansion with large grounds and figurative fountains. Kirito turned to Emilio and decided to find out why the hell he needed such a huge mansion. But the guy said that the bigger the place, the better, to which Kirito said that it wasn't that big. The guy said it was too big and his main house was in the village, to which Emilio told him to stop complaining because the servants could handle a house like that. Besides, he was going to take care of the discount. He wanted to live in a nice house. He only wanted to answer as he was interrupted by the girl who came with Emilio. He explained that to Mr. Emilio's friend they would like to offer their best product. There is a large selection of real estate for every taste. He just had to say what kind of house he wanted and she would find the right one. Kirito wouldn't even be surprised if he knew she worked for Emilio. Emilio called them over and said enough talk. Time was money and it was time to look at the house. Kirito asked him why he was so cheerful that it looked like he was buying the house for himself. The guy was surprised. He asked if it wasn't fun to look for a house for his friend. Kirito thought it sounded awkward. The guy clarified that there was a great view from here and there was a big company in the neighborhood. He asked why he didn't choose this house, to which the guy grudgingly replied as if he had found a fool. He also asked why he didn't like it, to which he replied that it was too close to the company and he wouldn't be able to relax. Emilio sighed and said it was a pity, but Kirito realized that it was better to keep an eye on this guy. They began to look around the mansion, which was quite rich. As they walked through some of the streets, Kirito noticed that the neighborhood was pretty quiet for a royal capital. The woman said that there used to be an aristocrat living in this house, but at the moment the house has been empty for 3 years. It would be far from the center, but it was very quiet. They reached their destination and the woman showed them the house. The house was just as big as the last mansion. Kirito was surprised that the house was cozy, but Emilio said that it didn't look like a rich man's house because it was too classic. She explained that the aristocrat who used to live here preferred a no-frills life. The boy thought that he and the aristocrat had similar tastes, and that it was much more peaceful to live in such a quiet place. She suggested they go inside, which they agreed to. Kirito was stunned by what he saw. He said that this house was the same size as the mansion, but the atmosphere was quieter. The woman clarified that he was right. The difference in size and number of rooms was minimal. She also explained that all of their houses were equipped with fire and water magic artifacts, and the guy said that it was very convenient. But there was another feature of this house. The woman said that it had a bathroom, to which the guy didn't believe her words. When he went into the room, he saw how big the bathroom was. Emilio decided to clarify that he is obsessed with cleanliness and washes every day, and Kirito asked what was wrong with it. He remembered that in this world it was not customary to take a bath so often, and he had heard that even girls washed every 3 days. He had to go to public baths just to soak in hot water. Kirito looked around this bathroom with surprise and without words. The guy sharply replied that he had made up his mind and was taking the house, asking for a price, to which Emilio was very surprised that he liked it so much. The woman said that normally she would set the price at 500 gold pieces, but since he was Emilio's friend, she would discount it and give it to him for 400 gold pieces. Kirito began to realize that such a price was too low for the local real estate market. Emilio got into the conversation and asked him to discount the price. Kirito was very surprised by this and she offered a price of 380, but Emilio was not satisfied with this and he said that he would sell at a discount those items that she wanted. He was sure that this could please her boss. She began to reduce the price to the maximum. Emilio thought that it would be much more profitable for him to sell it without a discount. She named a final price of 150 gold, but Kirito began to feel uneasy about this conversation. Emilio immediately smiled and said that they were completely satisfied with it, and they were taking the house. With a nervous voice, she thanked them. Kirito was getting uncomfortable, even though he had bargained her for a great discount. He turned to Emilio and said that he had lowered the price on purpose to make him work harder. The guy turned to Emilio and clarified that he had lowered the China on purpose to make him work harder. Emily confirmed that he was right, because the goods were very valuable, and he would have to deliver them himself. He didn't think he had bargained for a discount for nothing. But at the same moment he said that he was joking and the goods were already in the warehouse. He was glad that Kirito bought such a house at a cheap price. Emilio didn't stop scaring him, but this way he got a second house which is in a good neighborhood of the royal capital. After 3 days, Kirito returned to the house and was surprised that everything was ready, asking Emilio if it was too early. But he said that it was already in good condition, so it was quickly cleaned up. He also asked about the furniture. Emilio remarked that he had asked them to hurry up a little, to which Kirito asked if he had overdone it. But he replied that it was fine and that they would still get the benefit of it. He also mentioned that he had taken care of the servants. Kirito remembered that he had said something about it. They went into the house and the guy asked if they were already here. He heard a voice say welcome. Kirito saw a nice-looking girl with long blonde hair. She turned to him and told him that they were anxiously awaiting their arrival. Also behind her were 3 other girls, who were looking at them with smiles. Kirito was surprised and a little embarrassed when Emilio clarified that these girls were his servants. They were not what he had imagined them to be. Previously, Fauda Kirito has been given spatial magic by an entity that allows him to move anywhere. So he decides to live on 2 bases, one in the capital and one in the countryside. He was finally able to buy a new house in the capital, but the servants that Emilio had organized were not what he had imagined. Kirito clarified that these girls were the servants. The girl who turned out to be the main servant said that she was entrusted with the management of the mansion of Mr. Kirito. The girl made a shy bow and introduced herself as Elsa Walker, the head maid, saying that it was a pleasure to meet her. Then the guy realized, and he shocked Emilio that he didn't say she would hire young girls, to which Emilio only smiled and asked what was so bad about it. It was a feast for men's eyes. That was the problem. But then he heard her surname, and surprised, he asked her again, calling her an aristocrat. She confirmed that she was a Walker. She was the 4th daughter of a humble Viscount family, so he could take it easy. But then the boy decided to ask if that meant the other servants were too, to which the girl was taken aback and said they were from the Baron family. They took turns introducing themselves. The girl with red braids was called Larasha Elfir, the second with blonde tails Lulu Amistolt, and the third brunette was called Ars Landora, to which they all said it was a pleasure to meet him. Elsa clarified that they had all applied for an internship at Emilio's company to gain experience. Emilio clarified that the daughters of noble families sometimes work as maids. A disgruntled and shocked Kirito asked him why the hell he had assigned girls to his mansion as maids. Emilio hesitated and said he didn't know what he was talking about, to which Kirito asked him not to play him for a fool. In this world, except for special races, everyone who has a family name is an aristocrat. That being said, not all nobles are of the upper class, and it's not uncommon for younger children to go into the service. But that wasn't the problem. That's why her surname sounded so familiar, because all of their families are their business partners. But this was all flowery, as these girls were all between 12 and 15 years old. Even judging by the older maid, she wasn't even 20. This clearly smelled like some kind of crime. Kirito was embarrassed and covered his face with his hands. That servants who are above him in status, how can he relax in such an environment? And also, how can these girls be used like this? Emilio said with a smile that Kirito was lucky to be surrounded by beauties. Kirito said that there was nothing good about it, and why he had chosen only girls, to which Emilio was surprised and asked if he needed men. Emilio said that when he would come home tired, the sight of beautiful girls instead of harsh men would calm him down. Kirito asked if he had checked that, and he also said that he already had a cabin in the countryside to relieve stress and had not asked for something like that in the royal capital. Emilio thought about it. Kirito looked at him questioningly, and the boy smiled and asked if he had guessed. Emilio continued that he had made it clear when he met him that he wasn't into the male gender, but he didn't understand why he wasn't happy with the company. Kirito said that he had misunderstood. He saw little Nina with a happy face in front of his eyes, but he realized that he could be killed just for thinking about it. Kirito said he wanted to live a quiet life and wasn't going to have an affair. Emilio sighed and noted that he reasoned like an old man. Emilio and Kirito settled in the living room, and Elsa asked if they would like a cup of tea. They agreed to her offer, one of them choosing tea without sugar. Kirito kept his eyes on Elsa, looking at her. Emilio told him that he looked like he was uncomfortable, to which the boy replied that he couldn't calm down if there were maids walking around the house. Emilio also said that he didn't like to give orders at work, to which the boy said that he had never done such a thing, to which he thought that he couldn't get rid of the habits of a mere employee. The girl handed them tea and put it on the table, to which Kirito thanked her. Elsa explained to him that with all his respect they were now his servants, and therefore they were below him in status, and explained that there was no need for such polite treatment of them. Emilio also confirmed this, saying that she was right, because if you talk like that, it will not be clear who is the master and who is the servant. Kirito said that it would be hard for him to get used to it quickly, but Elsa said that he would get used to it gradually. The boy agreed and thanked her again for the advice. She gave him a serious look, as if rebuking him for something. Kirito said he understood her perfectly. In his head he thought that she was beautiful, but partly frightened him. Kirito realized that as soon as Emilio left Neo, he felt uncomfortable in the house and decided to leave too. However, their settlement of the maid contract had gone too quickly. He thought about it and wondered where he was in such a hurry. It was his day off. However, Elsa surprised him by not raising an eyebrow when she heard about his magic. But when Emilio left, he told the maids that if they cancelled the contract, Mr. Kirito would pursue them, thus scaring them as a joke. But the guy was a little tense with Ars. She took it all too seriously. But Elsa didn't care about that. It was obvious from her that she was an aristocrat. But in a moment Kirito was called by someone. Turning around he was surprised at who he saw. It was Reed, one of the adventurers of the Thunder Sword group. They went to a nearby cafe. Kirito said how long it had been since they had seen each other and asked how he was doing, to which he replied that everything was fine. Reed said with a serious face that when he stopped coming, he had to get rid of some of his lazy habits. Kirito said with a chuckle that he recognized the old Reed. He also asked how the others were doing. He explained that today was their day off. Arna and Alina had gone to the public baths, but Rox had decided to have a drink with some old friends from the guild. Kirito remembered the bathtub, that he could take it at any time, but it really wasn't a wasted purchase. Reed asked how he was doing. He had heard he was working for the company, so Kirito decided to think about what to say and told him all about it. Reed was shocked to hear that Kirito had bought a mansion with servants. He was interested in his work and how much he earned, and asked him to tell him more. Kirito said he wouldn't tell him because it was confidential. Reed said he was joking, but a house of his own is really nice. He began to explain that the purchase of the house was planned, but he didn't expect the maids to be there, and they were the daughters of noble families, and now he can't imagine how to look their parents in the eye. Reed clarified that he had heard of such a thing before and said he was jealous of Kirito. The boy apologized and said it wasn't bragging at all. He was really worried. His friend said with understanding that he was understandable. Reed decided to explain to him that they were very young and inexperienced. It was probably their first time and that they felt awkward too, mentioning that they too had to start somewhere. He explained that as a young adventurer he had had a string of failures and had often been down on his luck. However, if the guild leadership was reliable, adventurers had something to fall back on. Reed realized that it was hard for him to take on subordinates so suddenly, but he had to be firm for their own good, and Kirito agreed. However, even if they seemed calm, this was their first job. Kirito certainly knew better than anyone when his boss was a slacker, and he thought about it for a moment. In this case, he realized that he needed to be firm. Elsa was making her evening rounds and wanted to knock on her master's door. At one moment Kirito appeared behind her back, saying that he was at home. The girl jumped up with a cry of fright, and looked at Kirito with horror. He apologized for frightening her, but Elsa timidly bowed to him and apologized that it was her own fault for being frightened. Kirito thought about the fact that although she looked cold and unapproachable, she was still a young and inexperienced girl. Kirito turned to her and said that he would like to take a bath, even though it was early, and asked her to prepare one for him. The girl said with a gentle smile that she would prepare everything now. Kirito smiled back and thought that there was nothing wrong with that and would try to be a good host. He decided to turn to her again. Elsa clarified with him what she thought, the fact that he had left for dinner. Kirito explained that he had only been drinking. Elsa pointed out that there were no cooks among them, to which Kirito replied that he hadn't thought of that. He suggested ordering delivery from the restaurant. The girl clarified that if the gentleman wanted dinner, they could prepare it, but they couldn't compete with professional chefs. To what the guy was surprised and said that he didn't mind such a thing at all. After a while Elsa set the table. Kirito liked the way the food looked and said that surprisingly they had cooked folk food, to which he got a confirmation from Elsa. She explained that even though they were aristocrats, they were from small border towns. There was not much difference between their families and the common people, and Kirito nodded understandingly. It was true that girls going into the service were not entitled to inheritance. Many of them are married off to other families, but only the fourth or fifth daughter can hope to marry a knight or a merchant of low status. Well, or she could become a concubine. The interesting thing was that this was their test before marriage. But here Kirito seemed to realize the possibility that they could have been sent here to get Emilio married. But that seemed to be the case, because he left them too quickly. But Kirito decided not to think about it. Surprisingly, the dinner turned out to be really good, and that night, the guy fell asleep soundly in his thoughts. Waking up in luxurious surroundings and living in the royal capital wasn't so bad. Enjoying the hot bath, he was very happy to have it here. Now he could take it every day and soak in it as long as he wanted. It was a great way to cope with fatigue. He remembered Elsa offering to help him wash and rub his back. Once he had changed, however, he got up with the realization that he had to start getting down to business. Elsa met him downstairs and told him what he planned to do today. Kirito said that he had to see how the renovation of the house in the village was going, because it should have been finished by now, and he would be back in the capital in 3 days. He clarified that Emilio knew, but asked him to warn him anyway. Kirito gradually began to get used to Elsa and the others. He asked her to look after the mansion in his absence, to which the girl bowed slightly and said that he could rely on her. She wished him a good day, to which he thanked her and disappeared into the air, forming a small wind. In an instant, he appeared in the village of Horen. Kirito looked around the outside of the house and realized that everything was ready, but however he hadn't asked to do the outside facade. But it looked beautiful, and it now had a small garden in the backyard. The changes were minor, but it was enough to ennoble the exterior. Kirito decided to go inside the house, but the door was locked and he realized he would need a key. It wasn't surprising though, because the door was new and a new lock had been installed. Kirito didn't know where the carpenter lived, so he had no other option but to go to the headman's house. But someone called out to him. He saw Nina, who waved at him to tell him he was back. She shouted that she had the key to his house, to which he said it was great news. She shouted that she would bring it to him, to which Kirito said not to rush her. She ran up to him and handed him the key, to which he thanked her. Nina kept a satisfied look on his face. Kirito asked her why she was looking at him like that, and she said she could look at it too. The guy agreed and said that she would be his first guest. Nina was happy and said with a smile that she would be his first guest. Kirito thought about how energetic she was, but still, children are cute creatures. He wasn't interested in a romantic relationship right now, but maybe one day he would want to start a family. But at the moment he had no one in mind. Nina began to rush him to open the door, and he asked her to wait, so the two of them opened the door and looked behind it. Once inside the house, the bright light illuminated the hallway and hit all the corners, making the room bright. Nina noticed how much everything had changed and there was more space. The girl had no sooner stepped on the floor than she was stopped by Kirito. She looked at him and asked what was wrong. He asked her to wear slippers when entering his house. She asked him why, to which he said it was forbidden to wear shoes in the house. She looked at the slippers and asked him if it was part of the capital's culture, to which Kirito said it was just his head. Nina looked at him questioningly and said he was a bit strange. Kirito thought to himself that her childish directness would wound him without a knife. Nevertheless, he was not about to give his principles. In the capital he has maids who always clean up, and the streets are paved with stones so his shoes don't get too dirty. In the village of Horen it was a completely different environment. The wild roads were mixed with mud and grass. That's why he left a place to take off his shoes, but it looked strange to them. The girl said it was great. Nina said how light these shoes were, to which Kirito remarked that they were. He also explained that they were comfortable and didn't stain the floor, to which she said how smart he was. Nina also said that she liked them very much and would wear them at home. Kirito suggested with a smile that they should make it a country fashion, to which the two of them laughed. They walked further into the living room. They put panoramic windows in the living room with a view of the mountains. Nina noticed that the living room was bigger, to which Kirito said it was the same as it was. However, he simply removed the wall where the fireplace used to be and connected it to the kitchen. Nina clarified that that was the point, but the room still seemed bigger to her. The guy explained to her that he couldn't stand the cramped kitchen, and it was easier to move around. Nina asked him if he could cook, to which she got a positive answer. Well, he could more or less cook, since he used to live alone. But Nina said with a surprised smile that she didn't know that men could cook, to which the guy smiled and nodded understandingly. She clarified that this was the case, since she had never seen her daddy cook. He only drank all the time. Kirito laughed and said he couldn't imagine Andre cooking either. Andre was at his post and started sneezing, which made her think he had a cold. But also, she added, not only dad, but also the other men of the village. Kirito thought that in this world men probably never cook, but only work or do housework, although there must be cooks. Then it became clear why she was so surprised. He explained that he was still a long way from Stella and suggested that if there was a chance we could cook together. Nina asked him about cooking, to which she received a positive answer with a smile. Kirito explained that they would cook together and then eat together because there was enough room for everyone. Even when Kirito wasn't in the village, he and his mother would be able to use the kitchen. The boy thought that for the sake of an idyllic family atmosphere, he was willing to do anything that would bring people together. In this world, a house like this shouldn't be idle. His thoughts were interrupted by Nina. She said that she felt their life from now on would become even more cheerful. She couldn't wait to cook something together, and also to go to the woods for bugs, to play in the river and to go look at flowers. She had many things she wanted to do with Kirito. She said with a smile how glad she was that he had come to live here, explaining that every day would be fun. She held out her hand, saying it was nice to meet her new neighbor. He also extended his hand to her, smiling and saying that it was nice to meet her too. Outside, the sound of the bell began to ring, to which Nina remembered that she had to run home right away. Kirito was surprised and asked about the household chores. She confirmed and said that she was helping on the farm, looking after the leeks and other crops. Kirito explained that it was very cool. She said she'd like to tour his house some more, but he said they were neighbors now and could come visit anytime, to which she happily said that was the case. Nina said she would give him some onions when they were ready. She said goodbye and disappeared out the door. The boy's mind flashed back to how fast children are like the wind. He remembered what she had said about the farm, and thought that since he lived here, he could grow vegetables, which he thought would be good for him. He decided to consult Stella about it. Going into his room, he looked at it with surprise. It was spacious and empty at the same time. He had a lot of other things to do at the moment, so he decided to start by filling the empty space and opened the window to air the room. Opening the window, a cool draft entered the house. Looking into the distance, he appreciated the view from the window that spread out in front of his house, explaining that this was his life on two bases. Gathering his strength, he realized it was time to start furnishing. Andre came to visit, saying that he had just finished work and decided to help him with the move. But of course, Kirito thanked him for the offer and explained that he'd just finished it a couple minutes ago, to which Andre was surprised that he'd done it so quickly. He explained that his magic allowed him to carry the luggage and set it up easily, to which Andre nodded understandingly. However, he asked sadly for help, to which the boy apologized in surprise, but offered to come over for tea. Andre immediately thought of having a housewarming party. He was stopped by Stella and told that Kirito had a lot of work to do, but if he was finished, why not? To which Kirito smilingly agreed. Andre thought about it and said that he would ask Stella to cook some food. Kirito said that if it wasn't too much trouble, as he was tired and didn't have the energy to cook, they could use his kitchen. His friend agreed to the offer on the condition that they would just look at his house. He followed Stella and Nina to the house. Kirito noticed how much vigor Andre had and thought about having that much energy. Realizing that he couldn't cook anything at all, he decides to make different drinks. Nina was walking ahead and shouted that they came to visit him. Stella said hello to him with a smile. Stella decided to clarify that it was okay that they bothered him on the first day of moving in, to which the guy said that everything was fine and the house was ready. But in an instant, Nina stopped Andre and Stella at the doorstep. After explaining that wearing shoes in the Kirito house is forbidden, the guy only laughed, and Nina's parents stood and looked at them with incomprehension. Nina asked to take off her shoes and put on slippers. Kirito asked to do as their daughter asked. They noticed that the slippers were very comfortable and light, and wanted to buy one for themselves. The guy thought about the slippers gaining popularity. They went into the living room and were surprised at how it was furnished. Nina was surprised to hear that it was an amazing house, but Kirito noticed that she had been here before. Andre remarked that the boy had a good sense of style, to which Kirito was surprised. He remembered that in his previous life he had never put plants in his house. Kirito looked at his wife and wondered if she was alright or if she had gotten sick. Stella's eyes shone brightly as she looked at the new kitchen. She noticed the newest kitchen with magical tools that is so popular in the capital. She explained that it was the first time she had seen something so good and couldn't believe that water flowed with magic. Kirito looked at her emotions and marveled. The guy said he had never seen Stella so excited. Nina offered to buy her mom the same kitchen, to which Andre said it was probably expensive. Stella apologized with a smile, to which Kirito said it was fine. He suggested that she come and use it because she couldn't handle it alone, He was shocked. Andre suggested that Nina explore Kirito's house, to which Stella said that they were guests, and asked her not to do anything unusual. Stella apologized to the guy for being so noisy. Kirito said that they were fun and he was going to show them his house anyway, but suggested that she do the cooking. She said she had already done some cooking at home and opened a basket of food. Kirito remarked that everything looked very appetizing. She said there was a pot of milk chowder with potatoes in it, and also there was roasted venison. She hoped that this meat would be to his liking. Kirito, from the shock of all the food, said he liked it a lot, to which she could care less. This world also had seasons and it was now the beginning of summer. Kirito was happy to taste the seasonal dish of this world. The guy asked her what she wanted to make with the leftover food. She specified that she wanted to make a stew with an agilo mushroom sauce, and a salad as well. The guy said that if that was all she wanted to cook, he would be happy to help her with it. Stella suggested that she start before the two of them got hungry, and Kirito agreed. They changed clothes and started cooking dinner. Stella mentioned that Nina had told her that he could cook. Smiling, Kirito said that he could cook a little since he used to live alone. Stella said it was great that he could cook for himself. Kirito thought he felt awkward. Nina's mother went on to say that her husband couldn't help her. He smiled back and said that if she asked him, he would probably help. She decided to ask him if he really thought so, to which Kirito said that he did, thinking that he loved his family just as much as she did. He felt a hard stare behind him and turned around to see Andre watching them intently. Kirito asked him not to scare him like that. Andre said he'd fill in for him in cooking, to which he blinked out the door in surprise. Kirito asked what was wrong with him, to which Nina said that she didn't understand. But then she said that he was probably upset because she told him that Kirito got along well with her mom. The guy immediately realized that he was jealous and said he was getting hot. At the same moment, there was a shout from the kitchen that someone was getting hot, and her mom's voice came out asking if everything was okay. Stella and Andre were standing around the stove talking about something, and she put a wet towel on his hand. He was obviously burned. Kirito and Nina were admiring them. The guy remarked how beautiful they were, to which he received a confirming reply from Nina. Nina happily clarified that if she ever got married, she would like to be as happy with her husband as her mom and dad. Kirito was surprised that kids her age were already thinking about such things, but their conversation was interrupted by her parents, who asked her to help her set up the plates. Nina ran to the table and asked if the boy would help her, to which he nodded in response, sitting down at the table. Her father said with a smile that it was time to celebrate Kirito's housewarming party. They raised their glasses and shouted cheers. Nina said with a smile that she wanted to try her father's first course, to which Kirito picked up on that and said he wanted to try it too. Andre wished everyone a good appetite, but as soon as they took a small bite of the food, they immediately turned pale. Kirito explained that the meat was burnt and undercooked, and Nina said that the vegetables were hard. Her father couldn't believe their words and said that it couldn't be like that. Only Stella looked at them and smiled. For the sake of his family, Andre was ready to do anything. Kirito offered him to practice together so that next time he would succeed. He woke up early in the morning to a ringing sound. He didn't realize where it was coming from at first. It was the morning bell. Now Kirito lived in the village. He put the kettle on the fire to make tea. Opening the window to the veranda, he stepped out onto it and leaned on the railing, enjoying the view and thinking about how luxury was tiring. He thought about how peaceful it was and that no one was nagging him for not drinking tea properly. A place where he could live in complete freedom, he called his bastion. He could eat breakfast anywhere, drink tea anywhere, be a bit of a lazy slob, and that was the beauty of living in two places. Here he could completely relax. Going out into the yard, he started to exercise. He was interrupted by Nina, who was already running towards him. She wished him a good morning, to which Kirito wished her the same and remarked that she was up early today. He asked what he was doing, to which he said that he was doing exercises so that he could relax easily. Nina gave him a surprised look. She said she didn't know what it was for, but she would try it with him. Kirito agreed and told her to repeat after him, to which she agreed. They started doing different warm-up exercises together. Nina laughed and said that the moves were pretty weird. Kirito thought that they probably looked like that to someone from another world. The guy explained that one shouldn't underestimate these things. After all, her body would feel better after doing these exercises, to which she said that it was really interesting. The guy started to realize that the warm-up was taking too long. Kirito smiled and said they were done, to which Nina was surprised and said she liked it. That's when they noticed Stella, who said good morning. Stella walked up to them. Kirito also wished her good morning. She apologized for Nina bothering him since morning, to which he said it was okay and the two of them were more fun. Stella remarked that Nina was happier since he had moved here, to which her daughter said with a smile that she was. Kirito thought in his mind that was very nice. She asked him not to keep her too long because they still had work to do in the fields. Nina replied that she would remember that. Nina left with her mother after saying goodbye to Kirito. Then he realized he was alone and wondered who else was entertaining who in this situation. Kirito remembered that he was going to enjoy his free time, and realized that he was definitely not alone. He found a stool and placed it under a tree and sat down on it. He began to think about how nice it would be to cool off in the shade. He thought for a moment about roasting sausages on the fire as Andre had suggested, but definitely not drinking alcohol after breakfast. He looked up to the sky and thought of a great idea. He went into a small forest where he hung a hammock between two trees, which he realized was just what he needed. He remembered that he had borrowed some cloth and rope from Emilio's company and had made his own hammock in his spare time. But Emilio was skeptical of the idea. Kirito was a little worried about the hammock since it was handmade. However, it was quite nice to the touch, so he decided to lie down in it. As he settled into the hammock, he came to a slight shock. He compared it to being weightless. He wondered if he was too good for the first time, or maybe he was just a genius. Kirito remembered that he had never dreamed of such a peaceful life in the past world. Small rays of sunlight skipped through the trees, and a faint cool breeze blew across the boy's face. Kirito looked up into the sky and watched the birds circling there. He enjoyed the quiet rustling of the trees. It was the kind of environment he had dreamed of for so long, and gradually he began to close his eyes. The boy fell asleep in the hammock, enjoying every sound and moment that was happening around him. His rest was interrupted by Nina, who hovered over him and asked what it was all about. Kirito jumped up in shock and asked why she was here. Didn't she have to work in the fields? She said she did, but she was very curious about what Mr. Kirito was doing. He apologized to her for distracting her. Stella came up to them and apologized herself for not being able to keep her away. Kirito just smiled back at her. The guy remembered that children were very fond of such things. He realized how curious she was, and seeing something new she couldn't resist it. Nina said she would like to try to lie in the hammock too, and Kirito agreed. He said he would hold it so she could lie down. Stella apologized again and asked her to wait until she calmed down so they could get back to work. Nina loved it and said how much fun it was, to which Kirito said he would rock her and started to rock her, which made her laugh louder and louder. Stella asked if she was happy, explaining that it was time to go to work, but her daughter said she should try it too. Kirito and Nina insisted that she try lying in the hammock. She agreed, saying that since they were so insistent on it. Stella carefully lay down in the hammock, to which they told her to close her eyes. She obediently closed them. Kirito and Nina stood over her for a few minutes, realizing that she had fallen asleep. The boy asked loudly in surprise if she had fallen asleep, to which she opened her eyes sharply and was startled. Getting off the hammock, she nervously said that there was no time to relax, that she had to go to work. Kirito thought she was really tired. Nina suggested calling it a game day, to which the guy remarked that it was just a hammock and what a game day meant. Nina looked at her mom and said she wanted a hammock too. But then he shouted that enough was enough, talking about how plants are as alive as they are, to which Nina agreed with her. They said goodbye and thanked Kirito, but Nina asked his permission to lay on the hammock some more. The guy agreed and waved her back. He repeated Stella's words about plants being alive too. He hadn't done that much in the past world, because it wasn't that easy to lead a self-sufficient rural life. They lived in the countryside, where there was a lot of greenery. He thought it was the best thing to do, but the downside was that he didn't know much about it at all. Resting in the hammock, Kirito thought about his own farm. He began to imagine how he would have different crops growing in his yard. He realized that it would be great, and decided to try his hand at gardening as well. Kirito realized that if something to do, then to do it in earnest. But continuing to rest, he thought that today does not count. He closed his eyes and fell asleep with a smile on his face. The guy went to do some chores around the house, then someone knocked on his door. It was Andre and Nina. Her father decided to ask about having a hammock. Kirito smiled nervously and showed him where it was. Kirito thought they should tell them how to make one. It had become quite popular for a while. With the help of space magic, Kirito moves between the capital and the village. After listening to Nina, he realizes that he wants to have his own farm and grow crops in the village of Horin. He then turns to Andre for advice. Kirito came to their family's vegetable garden and looked at it closely. Andre decided to ask him why he was doing it. He said he wanted to plant something. Andre said with a smile that it was great. Andre said with a smile that he would help him with this, to which he was surprised and asked if he was sure, to which he received a positive answer and said that it was very good that he was interested in agriculture. Andre also asked if he had any experience in it, and Kirito said that he had grown small things in the past, but his friend said it was good too. Andre realized that he had to start with something simple. Kirito decided to ask if there were crops that even a beginner could grow, and Andre thought about his question. Andre assumed that if he was going to be missing in the royal capital, he would need something that he wouldn't have to take care of every day. To which Kirito told him that was exactly right, and that ideally for him something that with perfect care would grow on its own. Andre thought about it and suggested either green onions or potatoes. Stella came over and said hello, and Kirito said hello with a smile. Andre said she was just in time and explained that Kirito needed something that even he could handle, to which she hesitated and offered to look at their field, which was nearby. Kirito agreed with a smile. They came to a small plot of land that was beautifully tended, to which Kirito was very surprised and shocked. She emphasized how beautiful the field was, to which Andre confirmed it. Kirito asked her if he was sure he could handle it, to which he received a positive answer. Stella explained that green onions could even be grown in a flower pot in the house, and potatoes could grow on their own, and said that even a busy Kirito could do it. The boy got excited and mentioned that he felt he could handle it. Andre turned to him and offered him a taste of the onions he had just picked, to which Kirito agreed with a smile. But seeing Andre's hand in his, he was shocked at how big it was. Stella clarified that this size was considered normal for this onion. Kirito began to think about this onion that it was really huge, and it was not how he had envisioned it. It was comparable in size to a variety of leeks that had been specially bred in his home world, and he realized that he would never grow one. Kirito checked with Stella, showing her the size that it might be smaller in other regions, but she said it was too small, and clarified that he was probably imagining it and it was a weed. He thought he might have lost his mind. Andre momentarily broke it in two and cleaned it, then offered it to Kirito to try. Stella wished him a pleasant appetite and he took a bite. Kirito glowed with happiness and said how sweet it was. Although it was so big, it tasted like a fruit. Andre said it could be eaten in any form, baked or boiled, but he preferred to eat it raw. Stella explained that it was useful in cooking, as a condiment or garnish. It was very easy to grow and just as easy to cook. Kirito noted in his mind that he liked yakko cold. He decided that he would grow green onions. Andre was surprised at how quickly he agreed. Also, Stella suggested that he look at garlic since it was already here. He was surprised and said that it sounded like a potato. He thought in his head that it must be different from what it was in his home world. Stella explained that it was like a potato, only this one was easier to eat. She also clarified that it was tasty and hearty, advising him to pay attention to it. They had it growing in a neighboring field, to which Kirito said he wanted to see it. They walked over to another small field where green small bushes sat. Kirito was excited to see what the heartful fields looked like. Stella said she would bring some to try now. Andre said they were unpretentious vegetables, explaining that even if they were poorly cared for they would still grow, and said they needed minimal care. Kirito was interested in this and said it was pretty good too. Andre remarked that it was even easier than growing onions, and Kirito nodded understandingly. But then Stella came in and showed him some potatoes. She told him that they were longer and thinner than regular potatoes. Kirito was surprised, but she explained that they were to be eaten boiled and offered to take them home and cook them. Kirito thanked her with a smile. She also said that the other crops were a bit more difficult and asked what he thought. He said he would try to grow green onions and potatoes, to which Andre agreed and said they would. Stella said with a smile that she would share seeds and sprouts, to which the guy asked in surprise if she was sure. Andre said they had plenty of that and he didn't have to worry about it. He also said he could contact them if he had any problems, to which he thanked them. Once again, they helped him out. That afternoon, Kirito got to work and was already in the backyard making a 3x4 meter planting. After marking out the area, he made sure that the dimensions were the ones Andre had recommended and that he was good to go. He thought about the fact that he couldn't handle a large field, so he would expand it when he got used to it. First, he had to get rid of the weeds. He looked at the amount of weeds and thought about it. Applying the cut spell, the grass down was cut to a minimum. It was a simple thing for him to do, but the entity that gave him these abilities didn't think he would use his magic to cut the grass. It saved time though. The roots were still in the ground, but he could remove them when he started digging, which he did after the grass was cut. He thought about using the distortions to dig up the soil. As soon as he was about to use magic, he stopped immediately, and saying to himself that he would stop fooling around, he got to work. Andre looked over and said he had brought him some fertilizer and mentioned that he should add it when he started digging. Andre was surprised that he had already started digging and asked if he had finished mowing too quickly. He explained that he was too lazy to clean it up by hand, so he used his magic, to which Andre said it was very handy. Andre asked him to show him how he did it, to which Kirito agreed. With one swing and a cut spell, he mowed a small patch of grass again. Andre was clearly very surprised, which was evident on his face. Andre asked what that was now. Noting that it looked cool, he asked him to repeat the trick. Andre couldn't calm down and marveled at how skillfully Kirito was cutting the grass. He explained that his magic was very interesting and could be watched forever. Kirito was glad he liked it. He remembered the fertilizer and asked if he had brought some, to which Andre showed him a bag and the boy thanked him for it. Andre hovered over him and asked him to help him remove the weeds since he had brought him the fertilizer. Kirito clarified with surprise where such conditions came from. He asked him that he was going to give him the fertilizer for nothing, as he remarked that he was quick to change his shoes, to which his friend said that it was an equal exchange. Kirito understood him and said that for a bag of fertilizer for a 3x4 size, he said he would work in just that size, to which Andre said it would be too little, but the guy made a snide and calm face at the same time, saying it was an even trade, to which Kirito laughed and said he was joking. He said he'd take care of it, but he'd have to mow their crops, to which Andre said he surprised him. Andre thanked him for his help, saying it was hard work, and Kirito remarked that he must have a lot of work to do, to which he replied that only Stella was working, calling it love is evil. He also mentioned that even if it's a joke, negotiating with merchants is still a lot of work. Kirito said it's fine. Kirito remembered Emilio and said in his head that he hadn't met any real merchants yet. With people like them, he wouldn't be able to relax, but there was nothing he could do about it. Once he was in the other world, he came to this village and met this family. They were always helping him, and he realized that he had to think of a way to repay them for their kindness. He promised that he would do something about it. After all, they had taken him in and welcomed him as one of their own. Previously, Andre's family taught Kirito how to cultivate a field, and in return he decided to help them cut the grass with spatial magic. However, he feels that one reciprocated favor will not be enough. After doing a good job on his small field, the guy decides to take a short break. The guy was tired of how much grass he had cut at Andre's place, but was satisfied with their dinner. Kirito looked at the work he had done and smiled that he was definitely done now. He noticed that it was something close to a vegetable garden. He thought about how much he enjoyed doing something other than his main job, but the lack of exercise was taking its toll. Deciding that he would consider it his hobby, behind his back someone clarified that he was gardening, to which he was complimented. It was the old folks to whom he'd brought a letter with money. Taylor's mom clarified that they hadn't introduced themselves when they first met. Greg's father had assumed that a wandering adventurer wouldn't ask the names of ordinary peasants, but Kirito had apologized for that. They introduced themselves as Angelica and Griff. Kirito bowed his head to them and said that it had been a long time since they had seen each other, to which he also apologized for greeting his neighbors so late. Angelica said that it was okay. She said that he had enough trouble with the move that they should apologize for bothering him, to which Kirito said it was nothing. He mentioned that he was already settled in, so it wasn't a problem for him. The old men picked up on that and said they'd noticed since he was already gardening. Griff asked what he was growing. Kirito said he planned to start with potatoes and onions. Griff sat down near his small vegetable garden and explained that he should raise the potato bed so that the roots could grow. The boy smiled in surprise and thanked him for the advice and said he would do just that. But Griff also handed him a sack, saying that they had something for him. Kirito asked what it was and was told that it was a thank you for the quest and a housewarming gift that he could use as much as he wanted. Angelica held out another small pouch and explained that she had butter and cheese in it. Kirito immediately smelled the wonderful odor. Kirito asked if it was too much and if the plates were good. Kirito was surprised and asked if Mr. Griff had made them himself. Mr. Griff's family is a cookware manufacturer. Kirito remarked that such good plates could only be made by a professional craftsman. He also thanked Mr. Griff and said that he would cherish and treasure them. The old man smiled at him, but Mr. Griff became serious in a moment, saying that it was nothing special, but Angelica noticed that he seemed embarrassed, to which he replied that it was not true at all. Kirito thought that at first glance he looked unhappy, but he probably didn't know how to express his kindness. He decided to ask the old woman if she kept cows or sheep, to which she replied with a smile that she did. She explained that they had many sheep at home, and the food she gave him was made from sheep's milk. He thought of her as a real shepherd. He also told her with a smile that he would consider raising livestock, and she advised him sheep, as they were a steady source of milk and wool. She also mentioned that they could be used for meat, and the guy was shocked and said yes, I guess they could. She asked him to think about it, to which he replied that he might think about it, but he didn't expect to breed them for meat. Griff and Angelica went home and said goodbye to Kirito. The boy thanked them again with a smile on his face and waved back. This time Kirito cooked himself a small dinner, and he noticed the delicious butter and cheese that Angelica had given him, and also appreciated the dishes that Griff had brought him. Everyone had a role to play in this world, not only Griff and Angelica, but also Andre, who hunted in the forest and protected his village. Stella and Nina grew various crops in the fields. Everyone here had their own skills and they worked together as a single mechanism. And they didn't need any special magic to do it, so he realized that he didn't have any similar skills. And yet he wondered if he could. He wondered if he could do anything else to help in this world. The next morning, the guy had some unexpected visitors. He went outside yawning from sleep, but the village chief appeared in front of him and wished him good morning. Kirito was surprised to see him, saying hello in his full name, to which the headman asked him not to be so formal. The headman apologized for stopping by so early in the morning and noted that he had already settled in, asking if he had any complaints. Kirito said at once that he liked everything. The air was clean, the food was good, and the people were very kind. But the headman said it was hard to tell from his face and asked him what was wrong, to which he asked why the headman thought so and asked him to be honest. He told how Angelica and Griff had come to see him yesterday, to which the headman said that he had been doing their quest somehow. He said that they had given him various gifts that were very useful to him here. He was very happy, but he was confused at the same time. He wondered if there was anything he could do to help the village to return the doll. Realizing that he lived in two places, he explained that he couldn't live here forever and that he wasn't as good as the other villagers. Even though he had found his place, he thought about how he felt he was receiving but giving nothing in return. The headman realized what he was telling him and said he was glad that Kirito wanted to help their village. However, Leroy told him not to be in such a hurry, to which Kirito looked at him questioningly. The headman began to explain that they lived in a rural area with very few people, no stores, and very little leisure time. Even their children leave the village to live in the big city. For example, Taylor and Greg. As far as Kirito remembered, they had both become adventurers in the capital. It was not surprising, because young people never sit still. But here he preferred a cozy and quiet life. He thought about whether it was fair to compare himself to those who had just left the parental nest. Leroy told him with a smile that he was the first to move from the capital to the village, to which the boy was very much surprised. The headman said that they were very happy about it. They were all happy. Otherwise Angelica and Griff wouldn't have come to him, to which the boy was surprised. The headman explained that they were happy to see that a young man had settled here for such a long time, and asked him to keep his head clear. Kirito said in his head that he wasn't that young. He told him to just enjoy life, and at that moment, he remembered his father's words. He was still very happy to be living in this village, and he thanked the headman for his support. Walking past the fields, Kirito realized that he would have been better off listening to the headman's words, who suggested that he find something to do, and Kirito realized that he was right. As he walked a little farther, he noticed a small building. It was a greenhouse made of glass. Tomatoes were growing in it. When he got closer, he saw the familiar vegetables and confirmed that they were tomatoes. However, he didn't see any farmers growing tomatoes nearby, so he was surprised. Kirito liked tomatoes and was about to buy them, but he had a thought. He noticed that they were a bit oddly shaped like a bulb, and also had a very nice color, thinking that they were probably very juicy. Behind Kirito's back, someone shouted to him. Before he could turn and answer, a shovel was put to his throat, to which Kirito shrieked in horror. And the guy lowered his head without showing his eyes and told him not to touch them without his permission. He looked up at him and said he'd put him in jail for stealing his tomatoes. A guy of rural appearance told him to get out, calling him a tomato thief, to which Kirito, shocked, asked again about the thief, to which the guy asked him what else he could be. Kirito explained that it was a misunderstanding, as he had just noticed the oddly shaped tomatoes. Then the guy asked again who he was, as he was seeing him for the first time, and asked if he was from the village. Kirito answered that yes, he was from the village and introduced himself as Kirito, to which the guy looked at him with understanding. He realized that he was the guy who had moved here from the capital, to which Kirito asked how he knew him, to which he replied that it was very stupid to move from a good capital city to the middle of nowhere. He also explained that if he were an old man, he would have realized it, but Kirito was about his age. Kirito remarked that he had a very bad tongue. Kirito began to explain that just because a capital city was rich didn't mean it was perfect. He said there were a lot of people and buildings and not much nature, explaining that he liked the countryside, to which the village boy was surprised. He said that even though he was from the capital, he was easy to talk to and didn't seem cool. Kirito smiled and said that he understood him and thought he was being praised or insulted. He apologized for mistaking him for a thief, but explained that there were people who took things without asking, to which Kirito looked at him in surprise. Kirito asked if there were such people here, to which he replied that he was talking about strangers, people who were not from around here. He also said he didn't like formalities and asked how old he was, asking how old he was. Kirito said he was 27. The guy was surprised and said he couldn't tell. He said he had heard that before. He explained that Kirito was only a year younger than Andre, but he was already an old man, to which he asked him not to say it in front of him. Kirito realized that he knew Andre. He also realized that he didn't even introduce himself to him. He introduced himself as Elga, saying he was a tomato farmer. He also said he was 22 and the first guy in the village, to which Kirito was surprised. He thought he didn't know there was another man his age in the village. Maybe he'd be a little more fun. Kirito said that was great. He said he had planned to make friends, but there weren't many young people here. Holding out his hand, Elga said they would know each other then, and they shook hands. Kirito looked at his hand and it was covered in dirt, to which Elga said that he'd done a good job of teasing him. The guy made a serious face and said it was hilarious. He realized that Elga was obviously a prankster. He immediately apologized to Kirito. Kirito thought he could get along with the jerk. After washing his hands in the bucket, he asked what kind of tomatoes he was growing. Elga was surprised and said that they were ordinary tomatoes, to which Kirito told him that they were not, and asked him what kind of tomatoes were ordinary, to which Elga was surprised. He explained that he only knows the tomatoes they grow. He also explained that he went to the neighboring village to sell them and never went anywhere else. Kirito began to realize that this world doesn't have well-developed logistics for produce. Without cars and airplanes, they would spoil on the road, and there were monsters roaming near the road. Elga wasn't a warrior, so he wouldn't take any chances. Kirito asked him for one tomato to sample, to which Elga agreed and gave him one from the filled wagon, saying that these were already ripe. Kirito thanked him. In his thoughts he noted that the tomato was quite firm and looked quite ripe. Kirito couldn't stop stroking this tomato as it was too smooth, but he was called over by Elga. With a serious face he told him to eat it faster, to which the guy smiled and agreed and took a bite. He raved about how much sweeter and more sour they were than other tomatoes. Elga looked at him and asked if that was a bad thing. Kirito said with a satisfied face that it was insanely delicious, tastier than even any other tomato he had tasted. Elga was surprised and smiled understandingly. He explained that he had already guessed about it, he just decided to ask the man from the capital. Kirito watched thinking that he was joking. However, it is nice for any man to be praised for the result of his hard work. Although Kirito's words were partially true, they were not like ordinary tomatoes in shape. The juiciness and flavor was also different, as well as the sweetness and sourness were balanced. Elga must have put his heart and soul into growing them. However, Elga didn't know about their potential. It was beyond his comprehension because his range of motion was limited and it was unfair. And he was thinking not only of Elga's tomatoes, but also of the leeks, and Kirito was offended by that. Elga interrupted Kirito's thoughts with a question about what was happening to him, to which he got a question about it not being fair. He said the tomatoes were delicious and he didn't wish more people would taste them. Elga thought about it and said what he wanted, to which the guy said he wished everyone could savor them himself. When Kirito realized that such a special variety would be better sold as a special brand and not in the general market, Elga was shocked and asked him to stop as he was starting to scare him. He said that even though he may say so, it was all impossible. Kirito explained that if they could sell them in the big city, he wouldn't have to worry about what to do with them. He said that he would make money and people would be happy to eat his tomatoes, so everyone would be happy. Elga said he would have done it a long time ago if it were that easy. He explained that the village of Horin was in the middle of nowhere and that it was a pipe dream. Kirito objected and said that it wasn't. With surprise he said that he could spread his tomatoes all over the country, to which Elga didn't believe his words and said that it wasn't possible. Kirito said it could be done. About to explain who he was, suddenly stopped and thought. He realized that this was exactly the right occasion to do his part. He explained that it would be faster to show than to tell. He decided to ask Elga if he would be willing to travel to the capital with him if he didn't have the ability to travel instantly. Elga asked in surprise what he was talking about. The weather was beautiful outside. Someone was walking around singing a song. The streets were lively and among the people was a happy Miss Kushi, a senior in the Adventurers Guild. She was happy that she finally had a day off. The guild had been very noisy ever since Kirito became known as a transporter. When he left the guild, the girl had received a lot of complaints from the adventurers, but thanks to her restrained behavior, she was able to keep the peace in the guild. Thinking that it was her well-deserved day off and that it was time to take a break from work, she walked over to the ice cream man and asked for ice cream. Kirito and Elga appeared right in front of Kushi's face, to which she asked in horror what the hell they were doing here. To which Kirito also decided to ask what she was doing here. While the guy and the girl were figuring out who was right and who was wrong, Elga was terrified and didn't understand what was going on. He saw a large and tall building, recognizing it was the real castle of Zeller. As he watched them talking amongst themselves, he realized that he could indeed move between the capital and the countryside, to which he became very curious as to who he was. Miss Kushi turned to Elga and asked if he was his friend. Elga was surprised because it was the first time he had seen a beast man. The girl introduced herself and said that she worked for the guild, explaining that they were always looking for new adventurers and if he was interested he could definitely drop by. Partially at a loss for words, Elga said he'd stop by. After rolling around in his head that she was very nice, Kirito decided to bring him down to earth and asked about the tomatoes. The guy started pushing Elga forward and saying that he was just demonstrating his magic to him. Kushi watched with incomprehension as they walked away. She turned to Kirito telling him to stop by too, explaining that they would always welcome him into their guild. Kirito promised with a smile that he would stop by sometime. Immediately, they vanished into thin air in an instant, Kushi only giving them a glance. Standing firmly on the ground, Kirito decided to clarify, hoping that Elga was convinced. He also explained that with his magic he didn't have to worry about distance. Elga breathed a sigh of relief and said that was probably true, then asked him to give him time to get his thoughts in order. Elga answered that they could move to the capital, but the question was where he would sell them. Kirito explained that he was an employee of a large trading company and had good connections with his superiors, and that spatial magic had a storage facility that kept the produce fresh so that a large batch wouldn't spoil. Elga was surprised to hear how good Kirito was, and continued that if his tomatoes went to a big city, would there be a demand for them? Kirito clarified the matter. He said that Elga had quickly turned into a humble man. Was he afraid of the royal capital? Elga got angry and asked the guy to shut up. He turned to Kirito with a negative attitude and asked him what good it would do him if he asked him to help him sell tomatoes in the capital. He explained that if it would make their village richer, why not do it? Elga looked at him with surprise. Kirito said that he loved this village and wanted to be of some use to it. He explained that even though he was a stranger here, he was accepted as one of their own, and even if it was an unnecessary concern, he didn't want to give up until he tried. With a serious tone, he turned to Elga again, saying that he would distribute the vegetables of the Horin village not only in the capital, but all over the country, and asked the boy to trust him. Elga started to think about his offer and with an exclamation asked him to seduce him, to which Kirito came to a shock. So Elga decided to ask again. Is he sure that Elga will be able to sell it all? To which the guy gave a clear yes, because he would not offer him this having any doubts. After some persuasion, Elga decides to agree with him and try. He specified that he wanted to see if there would be a demand for his tomatoes in the royal capital. Kirito looked at him with a happy smile, but the guy wasn't done talking. He said that he needed money, because you can't make much money in the countryside, but farmers need money too. Kirito smiled nervously and clarified that that was the only reason he agreed, but he sighed understandingly and said he was right, to which Elga said they had a deal. After shaking hands, Elga said he could rely on him, to which Kirito replied to leave it to him. Remembering the first handshake, he asked if there was dirt there again, to which the guy said he didn't carry it with him and thought of Kirito gently holding his hand. At the house, Nina was drawing water from the pump, but noticed that someone was coming. When she turned her head, she saw Kirito and said hello. He asked where her parents were, to which she said they were in the vegetable garden. Nina called them and told them that Kirito had come to see them. Kirito apologized for distracting them from their work. Andre said it was okay, and asked what was wrong, also asking that he probably needed advice on the vegetable garden. He said it was about something else. Kirito explained the whole situation. Andre was surprised that Kirito was going to sell the village crops in the capital. He confirmed his words, but the man said that it was wonderful, but he was sure it would be sold, because it was a common crop. Kirito argued loudly that it wasn't exactly ordinary. He asked about the onions he had recently eaten, and said that he had never seen such sweet onions before, explaining that there was nothing like them in the entire capital city, so unique were they. Andre said he thought he was exaggerating a bit, to which the boy objected loudly. He thought it might be a bit presumptuous to talk about it as if he was a good judge, but the crops in this village were too good to leave the surplus to rot. He didn't know how much potatoes there were here, but given that they were easy to grow, the supply would be steady, and judging by the flavor, they could become a staple. Andre and Stella looked at each other and he said if he thought so, they wouldn't mind. Andre agreed and said why not try selling them. Kirito picked up on that and said that the headman had already given his permission. Nina's father was surprised at how prepared he was. Kirito smiled happily back at him. He also said that Elga's tomatoes would also go into the business. The more they would sell vegetables, dairy products, meat and the rest, the richer the village would soon become. Andre asked if they had already met, to which Kirito said that they had just recently. Nina asked him if they were going to sell Elga's tomatoes, to which she got a positive answer. Nina got excited and said that she loved Elga tomatoes. Kirito realized that she had nothing to do with the negotiations, but added some comfort. Kirito replied to her that he really liked them too. Andre remembered that he worked for a trading company and decided to clarify what he wanted to sell with them. Kirito confirmed that he worked for Emilio's company, and that they could be used to distribute products to the market and restaurants. Andre mentioned that he had heard that the company was very influential, so Kirito asked him what he knew about it. He replied that he knew a little. Andre had heard rumors from random merchants that there was a company that was growing at an unusual rate. But if Kirito's magic was involved, then everything was falling into place. Kirito objected and said that his contribution wasn't that big. He couldn't even think of anyone in the village who had heard of the company. Andre said that it was encouraging that such a big company would be doing it, and Kirito asked what he thought about it and if he would allow him to sell his crops. Andre said with a smile that they were relying on him. Stella clarified that it would be good for their family budget. Andre said that sounded a bit insulting, but he also clarified that they have surplus crops every year. Kirito thanked them for agreeing. He decided to ask if they had any other crops they were proud of. They said they didn't have a lot of crops, but they knew people who grew a lot of other useful crops and suggested they stop by. Kirito agreed and said he would be glad to. They walked through the different neighbors trying different fruits and vegetables. Kirito remarked that they had a good collection and that it would be enough. Everything was so delicious that it was impossible to narrow down the choices. It was a hard choice for him, but there was no point in showing everything at once. He had to get Emilio to sell it first. Otherwise it wouldn't work. He remembered his image and said he should listen to him. Even with his help, he had managed to create the biggest company in such a short period of time. If he didn't see his own benefit in it, he could give his opinion or refuse, even though they were friends. That was the kind of man he was. He realized that tomorrow's meeting with him would decide everything. The weather was nice outside. There were practically no clouds in the sky. In one of the prestigious houses, a beautiful maid was cleaning. Kirito appeared behind the girl's back with the phrase that he had returned. She turned to him and looked at him with an adamant look. She bowed to him and said welcome, addressing him as Mr. Kirito, to which he said in shock that she would adapt quickly. She said she couldn't be a head maid if she was constantly surprised, to which Kirito thought to himself that she was in her element. Kirito asked if anything had happened in his absence, to which she said no and explained that Mr. Emilio had left no messages. Kirito said that he had business with Mr. Emilio, and that he would go to the company hoping that he would not be busy. Elsa said that Kirito didn't have to worry about that. Emilio was sitting in the living room, and as soon as he saw Kirito he smiled and said hello. The boy thought he was at home and asked what he was doing here. Emilio said that he had decided to stop here for a while on his way home, and Kirito said that he knew when he was coming home. The boy thought that Elsa was used to this, but Emilio was not surprised to see him. Emilio asked him if he liked living in the village of Horan. Kirito said with a smile that yes, he spent time there in a way he never had in the capital, and explained that it was a relaxing place to be. Emilio with a thoughtful face clarified about relaxing there. He said that even though he didn't have such a shriveling body, he would like to spend some time there. Kirito asked him not to speak of him as an old man, to which Emilio grinned and said that he was a sensitive old man. Kirito decided to cut to the chase and said he wanted to sell something in the capital. Emilio was interested in his offer to sell, judging by the fact that he rarely brings anything, and Kirito said he would show it to him now. Kirito pulled a crop out of storage and Emilio asked what it was. He said it was from his village. The guy turned around and was about to leave when Kirito stopped him. Kirito indignantly said that he had just put it out and explained that it was a great product, to which Emilio said it was just a regular crop. and asked with a disgruntled face that the villagers had asked him for it, and explained that if that was the case, he refused to do it. Even if Kirito had asked him to do it, it was not in the company's interest. Kirito became more serious and clarified that he didn't bring them because someone asked him to. He showed them because he thought they would sell, and he clarified that he would never cheat Emilio or the villagers. Emilio sighed and said that he was right, apologizing to Kirito. Emilio explained that everything had to be checked personally. It was the backbone of the business. It was bad form to interrupt a man who hadn't had time to present his goods. But taste was more important than anything else, and Kirito explained that he was more sure of that than anything else. It was true that whatever Kirito said, the only thing that mattered was taste. But it was this aspect that was most convincing. He carefully chose the food for tasting. If his first impression was good, he would take a positive attitude towards the rest of the food. He had to try the raw vegetables first. Kirito handed him some vegetables to taste, mentioning that he had already cut them, to which Emilio noticed how prepared he was and said he would try the onion. Taking a piece of onion in his mouth, he immediately went wild with shock. Emilio was very surprised at how sweet it was and it immediately melted in his mouth, which Kirito confirmed with a smile. He explained that it would be even sweeter if you cooked it over low heat until it softened, and it could also be baked or eaten with salt. And he said that he had brought it too, to which the boy said that he had prepared it very well indeed. Emilio took another vegetable and said he was going to try this one. Laughing, he jokingly said he was now a tomato sommelier, to which Kirito thought he looked like a typical merchant. Emilio tasted the tomato and was surprised that it was sweet and tasty too, like some kind of fruit. Kirito nodded and thought about what he knew he would like. Emilio explained that they were completely different from the watery and sour tomatoes sold in their area. They had a delicious and rich flavor, and yet the balance of sweet and sour was balanced. Kirito thought about keeping his comments from escalating to the level of a review. Emilio called Elsa over and asked her to make soup with these tomatoes. The guy asked him not to get carried away. The guy asked Kirito to move on to the next tasting, to which the guy remarked that he seemed to be getting into the swing of things. Kirito asked his friend if he liked it and if it would sell. After finishing the tasting, Emilio apologized again for his rude words, explaining that he definitely wouldn't have brought the wrong thing. The harvest of the Horin village was indeed of high quality, all of which could be sold if he was smart about it. Before Kirito could say anything, Emilio confirmed that he had brought him an excellent product. Putting his hand on his heart, Emilio said that Emilio's company would sell the harvest of Horin village, so he also gave him his word. He asked him to help develop a sales plan as there would be a lot of work due to the expansion, to which Kirito agreed. A few days later, Andre went to his post and thought that everything was as usual, and nothing unusual was happening. But at one moment Kirito appeared in front of him at a short distance and said hello to him. Andre was frightened and put his spear at him, but the guy shouted that it was him, Kirito. Andre recognized him and asked him not to scare him like that again. Kirito apologized, saying that he knew it would be his shift today. Kirito remembered Alina's reaction, to which he moved some distance away. Then Andre noticed that he hadn't been in the village in a while, and asked what was wrong. The boy remarked that he was in the capital to sell their crops, which they had given him. Andre shockedly started asking how everything went, not letting him say a word. Kirito asked him to let him explain, and Andre calmed down with a nod. Kirito said he understood his interest in the matter, but suggested they gather everyone in the central square. Andre said he would ask Stella and Nina for help. As Kirito looked at him, he didn't expect such a strong reaction. People began to gather around the central square in confusion, talking about what had happened. Noticing how many people had come, he hadn't expected so many, but he also noticed that they had come with their families. Did they really care that much about the harvest? He was starting to feel a little nervous, as if he was going to make a presentation to the company. But then someone called out to him behind his back. It was Elga, who was also very curious about his crop, and he started asking Kirito questions. The guy asked him to calm down and then he would tell him everything, to which Elga said that he couldn't sleep at night because of it. Someone asked Elga to stop saying he was embarrassing them by addressing him as a brother. Kirito was very surprised by this. He introduced them as his sister named Mira. He thanked Kirito for helping her brother. Kirito said he didn't know about his sister, to which Elga replied that she was helping to take care of the tomatoes. Kirito said with a smile that he was pleased to meet her. Elga whispered in his ear that she was one of the few free girls in the village. The girl slapped him on the cheek and said it was none of his business, to which Elga said he was joking. Nina came up to Kirito from behind and looked at him with a smile. The guy asked what happened. Nina pointed at the people and said she seemed tired of waiting. to which Kirito said it was time to get down to business. Kirito apologized to the whole crowd for gathering them here, but he had to report the results of the trade. It was hard for Kirito to talk about it himself, but they had entrusted him with such an important matter to a complete stranger. Besides, he did what he could and kept talking. He explained that their crops had failed to sell through the stores. Everyone was surprised and started talking, but that wasn't all. It wasn't that it couldn't be sold, it was that it couldn't be sold to the stores. Helga asked what he meant, to which Kirito said he would explain. Kirito began to remember their conversation with Emilio. He was talking about whether he knew what kind of products they sold. Kirito said he did, and mentioned that it was mostly seafood and rare monster meat. He looked at Emilio with surprise. He realized that was it, to which his friend confirmed it and said that they didn't sell agricultural products, explaining that they could buy them anywhere. There is no port in the royal capital, so fish and shellfish that cannot be kept fresh, as well as rare foods that are in high demand. It's also full of farms that sell ordinary meat and vegetables. These foodstuffs are not enough for a startup trading company. And what's more important is that the market was already established. It was not profitable to fight for it under these conditions. Even if they launched them in the market under their company brand, they would not sell well. For ordinary people, the most important thing was cheap and tasty. That's why Emilio didn't work with vegetables. Kirito realized that this niche was occupied. He also replied that it probably wouldn't work. But his friend interrupted him and said that he had only specified that it would be difficult, confirming that he hadn't said it was impossible. Kirito looked at him with surprise. Emilio explained that they didn't have to sell these to the market, but they could sell them in bulk to restaurants. Kirito asked in confusion, to which Emilio continued. Not just restaurants, but high-end restaurants where nobles and royalty go. He also explained that there is an event where all trading companies sign contracts with restaurants. He already had such a contract, but only for seafood. But he said they could sell these vegetables there, thus extending the contract. Emilio's company branded vegetables. Now they had a name and credibility. Flavor, freshness, and quality were also important, but with Kirito's magic nothing would happen to them. To which Emilio said they could start, but it wouldn't be enough. Emilio explained to him that other trusted and contracted companies were also strong. They may have had a wider market than most, but they were still nobodies when it came to vegetables and other mundane goods. It would be quite difficult to shy away from the usual suppliers. For that reason, it wasn't so easy with restaurants. They needed a colorful advertising campaign so that other companies wouldn't even be looked at. They could also use a show tasting. Emilio was right. In the capital it was impossible to surprise people with big vegetables. He began to take the matter seriously. If he could not come up with anything himself, it would be unfair. Kirito thought about advertising. His thoughts were interrupted by Elsa asking if he wanted tea. But looking at her he had an interesting idea. He kept his eyes on Elsa and realized that it was probably the best option and could work. Previously, in order to sell food to high-end restaurants, Kirito had to go to an event where all the vendors would gather and he had the perfect secret plan. Someone approached the representatives of the restaurants, telling them to come up one by one. The streets were filled with cooks, different food, and different smells coming from all directions. The girls were inviting them to a tasting where there were products from Emilio's company. However, there were a lot of people here. The crowd began to ask questions about whether Emilio sells not only fish products. Someone wondered what kind of clothes it was. Others said they couldn't lose, replying that they were just wondering. Emilio approached Kirito and said that he had a great publicity stunt, to which he remarked that it was possible that they would be successful. He admitted that Kirito surprised him. He didn't expect that he could come up with something like that, to which his friend only laughed. He said that he didn't do much, to which he asked to thank the girls. In a moment of decision before the event, Kirito suggested asking Elsa and the rest of the girls to help promote the vegetables and asked how they felt about the idea. Emilio and Elsa looked at him in surprise. Elsa asked embarrassed about what they would do, but Kirito sighed guiltily and apologized to Elsa and said that he shouldn't have mentioned it and asked her to forget about it. Kirito explained that it was on the level of harassment, which was not good for future brides. Emilio asked what was so bad, to which he laughed embarrassedly and said that it was a very unusual idea, since he didn't even hope his friend could come up with something new. Kirito explained that he was still in his prime. Emilio explained that it was not a bad idea, since most cooks were men, and if they were served by beautiful girls, they would not refuse. Kirito asked if it was worth it for the sake of contracts with expensive restaurants, if it was not movies. Emilio said that the nobles and royal seven didn't go to such events. It was exclusively their milieu. Restaurants and companies are desperate to get better ingredients and better contracts. In fact, there was a hunt taking place there under the guise of a banquet. Kirito was very surprised at that. Emilio said that it probably wouldn't be enough. Kirito thought about it and offered to dress in the national dress of his homeland and serve the customers in that way. Emilio asked about his homeland, which was in the Far East. Kirito nodded and said that in the capital city you don't often see such things and therefore it would attract attention. He explained that for some reason he couldn't move to his hometown and so it would be hard to get clothes. But Kirito partially remembered what the clothes looked like and could probably make them in the traditional way. Emilio confirmed that it all sounded tempting. Emilio was useful in these situations though, he never questioned the details. Emilio glanced at Elsa and clarified that he should ask them first, to which Kirito confirmed it and said that they never got permission. Elsa agreed, and mentioned that they would just have to change clothes and serve the company's customers. It was no different than normal duties, and asked them not to worry about it, to which Kirito asked again and was told it was fine. She explained that from what they said, they could help Emilio's company in this way, and she said that Mr. Kirito rarely asked them for anything, and they were always ready to help in a difficult situation. Elsa said she would be glad if he started to rely on her more, but Kirito was surprised before he could say anything, and Emilio said that she couldn't decide for everyone, and the curious girls were already standing in the doorway listening to their conversation. They began to ask questions about what Mr. Kirito's traditional clothes looked like, how unusual they must be, and how cute they were. Elsa turned and said with a serious face that they also agreed. Emilio said with a smile that the decision had been made, to which Kirito said he had thought of something else. He explained that it would diversify the dishes they served. One of the chefs remarked how unusual the onions were, so large and sweet. Another chef remarked that the tomatoes were delicious and juicy enough to eat just like that. Some were even asking for more. Emilio confirmed that Kirito's plan to bring the girls to the tasting had succeeded. His friend remarked that they would only have to try them to realize the beauty of country vegetables. The guy also said that he was curious how Kirito's secret plan would work out, to which he asked not to be pressured. Elsa came up behind the guys and apologized to them for keeping them waiting. Before Kirito could say it was okay, he was surprised to see her. She said the samples were ready and would be served to the restaurant representatives. Kirito thanked her for that. A middle-aged guy was looking around and asking what it smelled like. Elsa came up to him and offered him a taste of the vegetable dishes. When he saw it, he asked what it was. He had never seen it before and assumed it was potov, but he was wrong, and remarked that it looked wonderful. Elsa explained that it was a traditional dish from a country in the east, a stew of potatoes and pork, with leeks and tomatoes. She also explained that all the dishes are made with vegetables that Emilio's company sells, to which the chef said it was the first time he'd ever heard of it. He was surprised at how good it was like a first course, the texture was soft and the flavor was delicate. The sweetness of the vegetables and tomatoes was pronounced. This recipe would definitely appeal to the ladies. He explained that he really liked their vegetables. Also, he would like to talk about the recipe and the long-term contract. Emilio appeared behind the girl's back and introduced himself as the director of the company, and was ready to give the details. The crowd started whispering about a big shot named Mr. Chamonter. He was the owner of a 5-star restaurant and one of the best chefs in the world. Rumor has it that he didn't sign long-term contracts with anyone, if these products were really that good. The girls approached people and offered to taste their products and dishes, explaining that they had plenty more. Kirito stood back and watched as people enjoyed the food and conversation. That's when Elsa came up to him with the phrase that it was amazing. She told him that all the restaurants were eager to sign a contract with Emilio's company, explaining that it worked out even better than they expected. She said it was the dish that Kirito suggested that decided everything. He explained that where he comes from they like homemade food, and she said the chef asked for the recipe, to which she clarified that it wasn't on the menu, I guess. Kirito had changed a lot by taking vegetables from the Horan village, and you could tell it had become a very different dish. It was lucky that there was a sauce similar to soy sauce in this world. It was quite difficult to make such a sauce, but he remembered everything he could. There were always tomatoes in their stew, but then he found out that they shouldn't be there, but it tasted better with tomatoes, to which she asked the taste of nostalgia. Kirito confirmed and said that his mom always cooked when she was alive. He didn't like tomatoes, but she was creative. He thanked Elsa for helping recreate that flavor, as well as all the dishes she had made. She explained that she could have done it herself, and explained that it was all thanks to him. Elsa smiled sincerely and said that she was happy to help Mr. Kirito, to which he looked at her with surprise. He realized that he wouldn't have succeeded alone, And in fact, when his culture led to such a result, he felt that his appearance in this world mattered. He realized that nothing should be forgotten. There may have been bad moments in the past, but he had plenty of good experiences. He realized that his task had been accomplished and he was able to repay his duty as a villager.